Good afternoon, everyone. It's 1:30. We're going to call the meeting of the Board of Supervisors back to order. You may notice that Supervisor Aboud is not here. She'll be back in about an hour and a half. She is at Jeremo Corelli's funeral this afternoon. They're very close personal friend. Family's a close personal friend, so she'll be back. So we're now on item number 25. This is the issue with respect to the contract for Buddy Miller. You want to talk to us, Mr. Woodbury?
Sure.
Okay.
The item before you is a professional services agreement to continue the engagement of Buddy Miller. Mr. Miller has been representing the city in the Empire Ranch bankruptcy since July of 2015. This is the first time that the item is actually before this board for approval. The reason for that is that he was initially engaged in anticipation that the costs of his services would not exceed $25,000. The bankruptcy through without the control of the city or Mr. Miller took some twists and turns and is continuing today. We anticipate some additional needs for Mr. Miller's services. The bankruptcy is still pending, and we think it's necessary and proper to continue the engagement of Mr. Miller.
Okay. Public comment? Anybody want to weigh on this before we bring it here? Board? We okay? Motion's in order. Go. Motion's in order.
I move to approve contract number 1516-134, professional services from Edmund Buddy Miller, attorney at law, regarding the Empire Ranch Golf Course, LLC, Chapter 11 bankruptcy case for a not-to-exceed amount of $75,000.
Motion by Supervisor Bagwell, second by Supervisor Shirk on the motion. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. Thanks, buddy. Okay. All right, let's take up item 26. This is a report from the Chair of the Utility Financial Oversight Committee from the March 15, 2016 meeting. Ms. Engelman, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Board. I'm suffering from allergies. I don't know whether it's to the pollen or the budget, but
Probably both, but that's okay.
And I need to explain, for the information of the public, UFO stands for Utility Financial Oversight, not Unidentified Flying Objects. So we did have that confusion at one point. The committee met on March 15th and took up a number of issues. There were, I know it says in here, 5 agenda items, but that was a misprint because the minutes say number 5, and then action items are agenda items, and so that got copied. I did have the help of staff on this since I was on vacation that week, and I appreciated their help, but that was just a misunderstanding in the budget, in the report to you. The first item we took up was an explanation of the cost allocations. Most of the committee were not aware of the discussion the board had had on that topic, and I will say that for the rest of the budget hearing, they did zero in on those items in the budget, and looked at them very closely. Second item was review and discussion on the sewer fund budget, and I will tell you that we're making progress, and it's consistent with the adopted financial policies, recognizing a phased approach to meeting that policies, and complete financial policy compliance is expected to be met the first year after we complete the 5-year phase-in, and that was the motion by the committee, and it was passed unanimously. So the sewer budget, it looks to be in good shape. I know you'll be hearing more detail on that later today. Second item had to do with water, and that was quite a discussion. We did vote unanimously to recommend to the board, approval of the water fund budget for fiscal year 17 due to a significant project revenue shortfall for fiscal year 16. Complete compliance with the financial policies won't be achieved without the elimination of critical capital improvements. The capital program should be reassessed next fiscal year to see if the revenue shortfall continues or improves as expected. Last year was an anomaly. We had people who volunteered to, because of the drought, to cut the usage of water. And our rates, like all utility rates, are based on usage, just like your electric bill, your gas bill, et cetera. So the more you use, the higher your bill. So people cut back, and consequently, the bills were lower. We think that's going to smooth out in the next year. So it would be, 17, 18 before we look at the possibility of maybe having to raise rates. So it's not as impending as it appeared to be from the newspaper story. We've got a year to see what happens and then do an assessment of it. If at any time we did feel a need to raise rates, certainly our committee would want to hold public hearings, get ideas from the public. This community is blessed with a lot of people who have experience in rate design, and get a lot of ideas and so forth before we would come to you with any sort of recommendation along those lines. And you heard everything about water this morning from Bruce Scott, who Mr. Shirk wisely appointed to our committee, and probably knows more about water than anybody else in northern Nevada, as far as I'm concerned. So, outstanding person. The third item was review and discussion on the proposed stormwater fund budget for fiscal year 17 and its compliance with adopted financial policies. We voted unanimously that you approve the stormwater fund budget for fiscal year 17, while recognizing that there is apparently not sufficient revenue within the fund to meet adopted financial policies. If it is the intent to meet adopted financial policies, staff should review options to increase revenue within the fund. This was quite a discussion at our committee. The initial suggested motion was that because you had refused to raise the rates on stormwater, but I could not think of a time when staff had brought you a proposal to raise the rates. So we reworked the motion to what I just read to you. Do we need to raise rates? Certainly, we're going to have some challenges in the stormwater. I think I mentioned in last year's report to you that our committee had said at some point we're going to have to look at raising the rates. But whether or not you want to look at raising the rates is strictly your decision, not ours. So if there are any questions?
Oh, well, we want to thank you and the Utility Financial Oversight Committee for the good work that you do in taking a first cut at the budget. And I'm particularly pleased to hear what you say about water rate increases, because my own sense is that, we're not going to go through an issue where we're raising rates to take care of conservation. We're going to tighten our belt to the bone before that happens. I mean, we're in the middle of a phased-in process right now. That's that. But as far as trying to recover lost revenues from lack of consumption, I don't sense an appetite to do that, but your committee would be the first to take a look at something like that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I agree that, the first thing we would do is look at efficiencies and maybe even possible cuts.
Sure, and then, have a decision as to what if there has to be issues, different projects, do a risk analysis of which project is, you need to cut, just do it like that. I mean, okay.
Right.
Right.
One of the things we had requested that I've not yet received is a list of the projects. I will say that the budget presentation from staff this year was greatly improved. In the past, the entire committee was very pleased with the format that we were given. It was much easier to follow things. The only other thing we wanted was a list of the projects so we could see exactly how various items were being applied.
Very good. I think I don't know whose light went on first, so. Huh?
Doesn't matter.
Go.
If my memory serves me correctly, we spent a couple of years doing a rate analysis on water and sewer, but we've never addressed stormwater other than to get the annual reports from staff. So if, in your opinion, that means that we need to revise our financial policies to exclude stormwater until we've had a chance to go through a complete public process, which takes 2 to 3 years, then I'd like to hear that so that we can incorporate that into any direction that we give.
And that might be one solution. I know that and because I was watching on my TV, when the day you adopted the rates, and stormwater, I guess, was mentioned in passing, but there was never a proposal put before you that I've ever seen for raising the stormwater rates that automatically got included just because it's part of water sewer.
So I'm part of what Brad just said there. I'm kind of interested in, we as a board voted to allow your committee to actually provide us more information and recommendations. So in keeping with what Brad just said, I'm very interested to see overall any recommendations that you'd have for us to change what UFOC's parameters are. So I look forward to that.
Yes, I have not yet called a meeting of the committee to do that. I was on vacation. We had Easter and so forth, so I plan to start work on that next week.
And you were correct, there was a lot of articles written about this in the paper, but I did forward my original question to staff asking if they would be on hand to ask, if I could ask questions of the minutes of the meeting. So I do have questions for David Burketta and Daryl Schultz, if that's possible, about the minutes of the meeting specifically. The first one is the idea that you will email the ratio of debt to equity in the sewer fund. Could we get that emailed to us, even though it wasn't part of it? That Darren recommended he could email that information. So could we get that information?
So you want a copy of that as well?
Right,
Okay.
thanks.
I just received that information at 8 or 9 o'clock this morning myself, and so it isn't, nobody's been keeping it from you. It just wasn't developed until today.
No, I didn't say that. I was just going by the minutes of the meeting that he would email it, so I was asking for a copy of it, that's all. I do want to bring up what Member Scott expressed, the understanding that the reserve objectives cannot be met, revenue is slightly less, and the staff recommendation is that we efficiently extend the time to reach the goals with regard to the reserve development in favor of what we're considering to be critical. And maybe if you could just elaborate on that a little bit, either staff member.
David Ricetta for the record. Is that under the water? Was that the minutes under the water side?
That was under the water, correct.
So what we were saying with that is we think that, we had a revenue shortfall this year, and when we do our 5-year capital planning, we have to be conservative and take a look at what we know, and that's what our projections are this year, and project that forward. But what we were suggesting with that is that, let's give it another year, and I think we all agree that we're going to see some of that revenue come back before any, decisions are made, and that's what we were saying is let's just give it another year and see where the revenues come in.
Still under the water, Member Spell expressed additional concern over a flaw in our rate structure, that we can't accomplish what you need to accomplish with the infrastructure. Staff is considering the impact of the water fund from the landscaping revision. I don't understand what that means.
So what that was in the context is we were talking about sewer rates, and what happened in the sewer rates, what we did is we created rate revenue stability by creating a flat rate. That flat rate wasn't incorporated into the water side, and there's multiple reasons why, but that flat rate wasn't incorporated into the water side. So the water side is dependent more on usage, and that's what the Commissioner Spell was referring to.
Then on page 274, or page 4 of your minutes of the Oversight Committee, middle of the page it says, I got to go back up to see who said it, because I don't have it highlighted. I believe it's Mr. Schultz, I think, but it doesn't clarify. What we're trying to inform the public is that with those rates, we said we would look at our assets and replace so much a year. And it goes on to say, then Member Scott mentioned, to have the connection fee adjusted and the process that this committee recommended last year implemented. So I'm a little confused as to to have this connection fee adjusted and the process this committee recommended last year implemented.
I can address that. And what they were referring to was connection fees. And so we after this, we went to the Board of Supervisors, reviewed connection fees, were asked to bring that back, and the connection fee discussion will be happening within the next 2 months. We'll be bringing back a discussion about connection fees, water and sewer.
Excuse me if I might just add to that. Part of that has to do with the fact that they don't go into effect until July 1st. And so that's why the discussion had not been brought to you earlier.
We've already had a motion on escalating to that. I mean, you need to
What the direction was is to bring it back to you for changes. And I think there was an agreement on what the changes would be, bringing back the municipal code change. So 2 readings of the municipal code.
There has to be an ordinance change in order to raise the hookup fees.
Then on page 276, first paragraph, it says, Mr. Schultz goes on to say, but what it comes down to, the financial policies that got put into place for the 3 funds, they should never have been put in place for the stormwater because we didn't do the rates at the same time. So I just want clarification of that.
So when we did the financial policies, it was for the 3 utilities, but there was never, with the financial policy, to meet those goals, those objectives, there was a 5-year rate plan to do that for sewer and for water. But there was no 5-year rate plan for stormwater, but it had the same financial policies as the other 2. There's no way we can meet those financial policies in stormwater unless you have rates, unless you have money to meet those. Those rates were never part of the discussion. So that will always be the case. We either need to, as Chairwoman Engelman said, we either need to get rid of those policies for stormwater, or we need to figure out how to come up with revenue to meet those policies. But you can't have one, you can't have them both.
So would that be a discussion the Oversight Committee will have?
Yes, it
In
is.
the future, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then, also same page 276, a board member mentioned the committee needs clarification from the board if they want the stormwater utility to comply with the financial policies. And that goes back to what we just discussed right now, correct?
That's correct. That's what I had brought to you.
Okay, but the committee needs clarification from the board. So are we going to discuss it first and then send it back to the Oversight Committee?
Well, yes. Briefly, yes.
As was mentioned by Supervisor Bagwell, one opportunity to do that was when the UFOC meets again, that could be one of their recommendations back to you in terms of changing something.
Wouldn't it be just easier to have an agenda item so we can make the recommendation for them rather than come to us and then we have to go back to them? Just a thought. You can do whatever you wish.
Well, since we're going to have to call a meeting to redo our resolution anyway, that could be another item on our agenda, and that might make it simpler for you. I know your agendas have been packed lately, and so we could bring all of that to you at one time, and then you could discuss it.
Thank you. That clarifies everything. I appreciate it.
Okay. Please pass on to your committee. Thanks for the work. Motion.
I certainly will.
Yeah, I
Thank
think,
you.
do we do a motion on this one? Yeah, we do. Motion's in order. Supervisor Bagwell. Public comment, I'm sorry. I apologize. Public comment on that? I don't see any. Okay. All right. Supervisor Bagwell.
I'm going to make it.
Oh,
I move to adopt the report from the Chair of the Utility Financial Oversight Committee from the March 15th, 2016 meeting and direct the committee to bring back a recommendation on the financial policies for the Stormwater Fund.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Thank you. All right. All right. Let's take up the finance issues now. Everybody had a chance to look at the condition of each fund in the Treasury, the monthly statement from Nancy?
Question.
Questions in order. Go.
When I'm looking at this document, and I think I know the answer, but just for public record, when I look at Fund 201 on the airport, normally that one's a pass-through account, and we get those little tiny balances of 7 cents, 5 cents. How come we have 1,838 left? Is it just timing of not passing it through or something?
That's correct. Nancy Paulson,
we don't
Chief
get their money.
Financial Officer. Right. It's just the timing on that the payment hasn't been transferred over to the Airport Authority, or it hasn't been posted.
Maybe we'd start getting a little.
No.
Okay.
Anybody else want to ask Nancy any questions on it? Public, anybody want to talk to Ms. Paulson about the statement of condition of funds? Seeing none, motion's in order.
I move to accept the report on the condition of each fund in the Treasury and the statements of receipts and expenditures through March 25th, 2016, per NRS 251.030 and NRS 354.290.
Motion and second on the motion. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. Thank you. All right. I was going to say, Ms. Engelman, I think you brought to us the issue of bringing the statement of condition of treasuries
Years ago.
years ago. I think you, okay. All right. All right, 27B. Now we're going to go on to the tentative budget. How do you want to proceed here?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, you caught me just as I was drinking a gulp of water. Okay, what we're going to do here right now is we're going to run through the general overview of the entire budget. We will cover all the enterprise funds, and then if we could take about a 5-minute break, we'll swap out computers, and I'll bring all the departments up to go through their briefs.
All right, and before we take a break, we'll ask questions of either Sherry or Nancy.
Absolutely.
At that time. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Nancy Paulson, Chief Financial Officer, and I have Sherry Russell here, the Deputy Chief Financial Officer. And Sherry and I will be doing an overview of Carson City's fiscal 17 tentative budget. And after that, the Sheriff's Department and the courts will have presentations on their budgets. And then all the departments that participated in the budget open house will also go over their presentations that they prepared for the open house. So to start out with, we'll look at the city, the big picture of the city. The next two charts include all budgeted funds of the city. So total budgeted revenue citywide are $138.2 million. The biggest piece of the pie is intergovernmental resources, which is in the bottom there in the purple. These include the state consolidated tax distribution, which is by far the largest source at $25.6 million. It also includes federal, state, and local grants, and the state motor vehicle fuel taxes. Charges for services have been broken up into 3 different sections, 3 different categories. The enterprise fund charges for services, this is mostly made up of the water and sewer funds, which make up approximately $27 million. The remaining enterprise funds make up approximately $5 million. The internal service fund charges for services are charges to other city departments, employees, and retirees to offset the costs of various centralized services such as group medical, workers' compensation, and fleet maintenance. The other governmental fund charges for services, which is down in the blue, the 8%, that includes landfill revenue, internal service charge revenue to the general fund based on the cost allocation plan, culture and recreation fees, and health department fees. The next is the property taxes, which is 17%. And this includes the general fund, which is $22.6 million, and other voter approved, such as the senior center and NRS allowed tax levies for capital projects and indigent funds. So other taxes are made up of county option motor vehicle fuel sales and use taxes, such as the RTC 9-cent tax, the quality of life and street maintenance, and V&T special infrastructure and the infrastructure fund 1/8% sales tax. Licenses and permits are franchise fee from entities such as Southwest Gas and Nevada Energy. So this slide are all funds of the city, the expenses by function. Total expenditure budget for the city is $136.7 million. Public safety is the largest piece of the pie at $37 million. This includes fire, sheriff, the 911 surcharge, and other public safety grants. The general government includes city hall departments, internal service funds, and they're estimated at $29.5 million. The utility enterprises, in the orange at 15.8%, include the water, sewer, and storm drain funds for a total of $22.9 million. This next slide is for people like us that like numbers more than pictures. And these are the numbers that fed into the prior two pie charts. This is Schedule S1 from the state budget document.
Nancy, if you could go back just a second. Under proprietary funds, those are bond proceeds.
Proprietary funds. No, those are the charges for services.
The 46 million
Yes.
under revenues?
That's correct.
Okay.
Next, we have the general fund revenues. We're very conservative in developing the revenue projections for FY17. Total general fund revenues are expected to increase by just 1.1%. Property taxes and licenses and permits are projected at 1%. We're projecting the consolidated tax at 4%. And the charges for services are expected to decrease 0.8%. And this is due to a decrease in the internal service charge revenue to the general fund based on the cost allocation plan.
So Nancy, on that slide, if you go back, would you say charges for service are going to decrease by how much?
0.8%.
Okay, so, but when you say the 16.67%, there's, in the future, maybe you could show the difference of the.
Yeah, that's how much of the general fund revenue
Right,
that's from the charges for services.
But from last year, we're decreasing it by 8%. Is that what you, no, I'm.
Not the percentage.
8/10, okay. Okay, so that's relatively nothing then.
Right.
Okay, that's what I want to clarify. Thank you.
So this is a general fund revenues by source for 10 years. We're pretty consistent from year to year with property tax and consolidated tax being the majority of the revenue. And for fiscal 17, those two revenue sources make up 71% of the general fund revenue. I've already gone over this when we were going over the other slide. So next, we'll talk about property tax rates. In fiscal 13, the city decided to raise the operating rate by 47 cents, or by 47 cents, and to a total rate of 3.66, and that's the portion of the rate that goes to the general fund. And then you'll see the change from fiscal 13 to 14 was due to dissolving the Sierra Forest Fire Protection District, and then we eliminated the tax for that district. For fiscal years 15 and 16, the board lowered the tax rate by 2 cents each year. And for 17, the board directed staff to maintain the current tax rate at $3.52. So the bars on this chart are the assessed values, and the line are the general fund property tax revenues. So due to the effect of the property tax caps that were enacted in 2005 and the resulting abatement, the property taxes continued to increase from fiscal 9 to fiscal 12, even though assessed values were declining. So there's a spike in revenues in fiscal 13, and this is the result of the city increasing the operating rate by 47 cents. So assessed values have shown increases since 2014, with revenues increasing at a lower percentage due to the property tax cap. The caps for fiscal 16 were 3% for residential and 3.2% for commercial. The caps for fiscal 17 are 0.2% for both residential and commercial property. So for fiscal 17, property taxes are expected to increase by only $243,000.
And Nancy, if you project out, we're kind of expecting them to stay flat for the next 5 or 6 years, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Based on the 10-year average change in the assessed value is at a negative amount due to the declining assessed values. So next we'll talk about consolidated taxes. It's the largest source of income in the general fund. So C-tax revenue is showing strong growth. We're almost back to the peak levels in 2006 of $26.8 million. For fiscal 15, we had an increase of 10.9% over the prior year. And based on state final revenue projections, we're projecting a 7% increase for fiscal 16. And with 7 months of data in, we're currently at 8.3% increase. And then finally, for fiscal 17, we budgeted a 4% increase. This slide shows the taxable sales for the last 3 years. And 2015 is in green, and as you can see, each month of 2015, we realized increases over the prior year. Now on to general fund expenditures. By far the largest portion of the expenditures are for public safety, and this includes fire, sheriff, juvenile probation and detention, and alternative sentencing. At about half as much as public safety is the general government, and these departments include city hall departments such as finance, IT, HR, the DA, planning, facilities maintenance, and the court clerk and recorder. General fund expenditures for fiscal 17 are relatively flat when compared to fiscal 16, showing a slight decrease of 0.5%. So these are the categories of the general fund expenditures, and salary and benefits account for 75.6% of all general fund revenue or expenditures. The city currently maintains 10 separate employee agreements contracts, and for 17, the 17 budget was prepared in accordance with the provisions of these contracts. So this graph displays expenditures by function for the past several years. We're pretty consistent from year to year with public safety and coming in first place, and general government, the second highest. So this slide shows the provisions of the various employee contracts that were used to prepare the fiscal 17 budget. Most of them include merits and salary range adjustments. PERS will remain the same for fiscal 17, and for group health insurance, we assumed a 5% increase in premiums, but we're still in negotiations with providers, and we anticipate that that will be much less than 5%. Mm-hmm.
How much does that 5% represent? How much dollar increase is throughout the budget for the insurance?
Each percent is 150.
It's about 150 to 200,000.
So for
1% of the
so if we can get it
salaries.
even down 1 or 2, we might have some CIP room or something. Okay, thank you.
All right. And we budgeted $300,000 transfer to the OPEB trust in the group medical fund, and the workers' comp. In the workers' comp fund, we had a 10% increase to build reserves for projected increase in claims expense.
For the abbreviations, could you clarify what OPED or EB stands for?
Other post-employee benefits, employment benefits. So this is a chart of the full-time equivalent employees by fiscal year. The FTEs increased by 3.65 employees from fiscal 16 to 17. The additional FTEs were all approved by the board at previous meetings. There was one position that was inadvertently left off the FTE calculation. The position has been budgeted. The number was just wrong in the position control. For services and supplies, we kept these numbers flat except for minor contractual adjustments. We have appropriated $336,000 in community support funds. And some of the state pushdowns that we have are for youth parole services, pre-sentence investigation. The largest is for child protective services. For 17, that's expected to be $544,000. And
Excuse me,
Nevada mental
Nancy,
health.
I'm sorry to make you go back. Could you go back to the slide of full-time employees? If we look at 2007, we had 637 employees versus 2017, we have 580. Can you tell me what in those 2 years, is there a significant difference in the 10 years in the budget, the dollar amount, overall budget, as we're talking here today? As you mentioned, we have 136 million. What is the difference in the budgets then? You don't have to answer me now, but if you can get back to me. I'd like to see the comparison of what we had budgeted each year versus the employees we had.
Okay.
Because it changes. I mean, that's a significant change. I don't know if that was because of the money issues.
Right,
or-
it's because we had a decline of like $10 million. over
Right.
the-
I think that's, when people look at this, I think those are questions that the average citizen would like to have answered as
Okay.
well.
I can get that information for you.
Thanks.
I just don't have it here.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Question on the child protective services. Is that the area during the legislative session that the understanding was that potentially that was overcharged to us? So do you see in fiscal 18, because we'll have to wait for a legislation to correct it, but do we see any opportunity for that number to decrease?
That's a great question. We're going to keep pushing this issue with the legislature. We've got a 4-county coalition together. We were all overcharged based on an incorrect assessment, and we're going to continue to work that with them, with the legislature. But the good news is, if there is good news in here, the level of service we've been provided has increased. So, you know, there is a little bit of a silver lining in that cloud, so to speak.
Can I just ask what type of mental health services are being provided for the 16,000 that's being pushed down? Anybody answer that?
That's in the health department budget. I'm not sure if Nikki,
I guess Nikki's not here.
yeah, she is.
Okay.
Or is that under Mary Jane?
Nikki, Director of Carson City Health and Human Services. So that hits our human services budget, and we can provide more information as to exactly what is all detailed there.
All right, for transfers out in the general fund, we budgeted $100,000 for extraordinary maintenance. And then based on the city's financial policy priority to increase reserve funds, no additional capital funding was allocated from the general fund in fiscal 17. So this is the general fund in total. So the current financial policies to maintain ending fund balance at a minimum of 5% of annual expenditures with a goal of 8.3% as an operating reserve in the general fund. So as identified in the slide, the budgeted ending fund balance for fiscal 17 is 7.26% of expenditures. This is a 41% increase over the fiscal year 16 budgeted ending fund balance of 5.15%. We've also budgeted contingency of $500,000.
You know, Nick and Nancy, going back to what Supervisor Bagwell said about CPS in the four-county thing. We get one bill draft request. Just keep in mind that, we might want to use that bill draft request to address that issue. I mean, just in case, so it doesn't get stuck in the budget hole somewhere. We got a number on it, but just keep that in mind. Okay.
So that's it for the general fund. I was going to go into a few of the special revenue funds. So the first one is the capital projects fund, and this is used to account for the 5-cent property tax for capital. For fiscal 17, it's estimated to be $620,602. The debt service in this fund is $230,000, and there's $392,000 available in fiscal 17 for capital needs.
And we're going to discuss that at a later meeting. Is that
Yes,
right?
we're
We
going to
don't
bring
have
that back at the May
no estimates right now.
5th meeting. So next we have the Quality of Life Fund. So let's see. The Quality of Life Fund, we assumed a 4% increase in sales tax for fiscal 17. The 17 budget includes $239,000 for the aquatic facility roof, $200,000 for open space maintenance and management, $379,000 in open space salaries, and $120,000 payment to the Boys and Girls Club.
Nancy, the $50,000 transfer out for the MAC, what is that for?
That is to subsidize the operating expenses of the MAC. Next, we have the Regional Transportation Fund, and we assumed a 1% increase in the county option fuel tax for 17 to $3.4 million. $1.6 million is budgeted for debt service.
Excuse me, when you go to that, are you anticipating an increase of 1% in that sales tax?
In the fuel tax.
In the what?
Oh, are you
Fuel
talking about
tax.
the Regional Transportation Fund?
Right, but we've been told numerous times that fuel consumption is going down. Am I missing something there?
Did we get that from the state? Yeah. I think that came from the state revenue projections.
Okay, but our projections should be based city, not statewide, right? Or is it statewide?
This,
It comes from the state. It's a pass-through kind of revenue. So they give us an estimate of what they think they're going to pass through to us. And we compare our projections with theirs and use the most conservative.
How does this compare to last year's?
I think last year we said 2 or 3% increase. And this year it's only 1.
yeah, so it's only going up 39, we're estimating 39,000. And then 1.45 million is budgeted for capital projects. Next is the Street Maintenance Fund. We also assumed a 1% increase in fuel taxes and a 4% increase in the sales tax. The total revenue is a little over $4 million for this fund. Approximately half of that is budgeted for salaries and benefits, a little over $500,000 for capital projects and street and sidewalk improvements. Over $2 million was budgeted for street and sidewalk improvements in the current fiscal year, and any amounts unspent at the end of the year will be carried forward to fiscal 17. Next, we have the Building Permits Fund. We're estimating that revenues for fiscal 17 will be $684,000, which is the same as what we're estimating for fiscal 16. This is a 19% increase over fiscal 15 actuals. The cash balance in the fund is estimated to be $129,000 at the end of fiscal 17. The contract with Charles Abbott and Associates to perform building and safety functions for the city is budgeted at $350,000, and that's 55% of the building permit fees.
Nancy, in this particular fund, we're burning through cash at about approximately $100,000 a year out of our cash balance, which means that we'd have enough cash in there to run one more year in operations. So are we going to have a discussion about how to correct that going forward? Because after next year, we would have no available cash to
Right.
subsidize the budget with.
I actually looked at the revenue year-to-date, fiscal year-to-date. I looked at that this morning, and we're already at $684,000. So I think we are really conservative with our revenue projections. And we had, in March, we received $225,000 in building permit revenue.
How does that translate to the bottom line, though? So gross revenue, if we're paying a percentage to Charles Abbott, and then we have operating expenses and salaries and benefits, how does that additional revenue translate to the bottom line?
I was expecting that would increase the net income by about $100,000 if you project, revenue out through the end of the year, and then that would basically get us to a break-even point in 16, and then we're hoping the revenues then for 17 would increase.
So is the thought process that new construction is going to fuel enough additional revenue that this fund will stabilize?
Yes.
Okay.
Nancy, on service and supplies, in 14-15 it was 419, and 15-16 it was 693.
I believe that's the Charles Abbott contract, which goes up as the revenues go up.
So they were employed 14 and 15 too, also, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so,
It might have been a partial year for 14-15.
and in the future, you might have something to point when you're talking numbers.
Oh, a little pointer, yeah.
Well, it's hard to because they can't see that.
On a TV.
But we can see it here. That's what I'm asking. So when she's talking numbers, it'd be easier if someone was on the computer with the arrow showing where she's talking, at least for the audience.
That'll come up during the slideshow. And then also in prior years, we weren't charging out the entire internal service charge, and that's why the cash has gone down, currently, is because once the fund started making more revenue, then we put back in the full cost, the internal service charge.
So maybe just on the building fund in the future, somewhere over this summer or whatever, we could look at the overall picture of the building fund. And, we don't need it today for this process, but maybe we could have a report or a future agenda item just looking at a forecast over the next 5 years or something, just to look at the stabilization.
Yeah, I think we were going to do that at the end of this fiscal year, just so we had a full year with Charles Abbott. So next is the workers' comp fund. So fiscal 17 will be the 7th year of self-insurance. We projected a 10% increase in the workers' comp rates, and this is to accumulate reserves for projected increases in the claims expense. Claims for fiscal 16 and 17 are estimated to be $500,000, and the cash at the end of 17 is estimated to be $3.2 million. Next is the general fund long-term analysis. I'm not sure why I didn't put this at the end of the general fund, but here it is. So each year when we're preparing the budget, we also do a 5-year projection to ensure that we can cover the ongoing costs of the general fund. So revenue projections were very conservative from fiscal 18 through 21. We included a 4% increase in consolidated tax, a 2% increase in the property tax for fiscal 18, and 3% for 19 through 21, and then 1 to 3% increases in all other revenues. We budgeted the salaries according to the provisions of the employee contracts and a 7.5% increase in group medical.
Question there. On the contracts, are they all through 2020? So we have a solid number there, or some of them are not through 2020 and the projection may be actually light?
Right. Not all of them are through 2021 CCEAs, but we generally just continue on, in our projections, what they've been receiving in the contract.
So you mean it does have an inflationary answer in the projection model? It's
Right.
not at the cutoff rate at the final contract?
Right, so even though we don't
Okay.
have a contract, if it expires in 2018, we still continue on a rate increase. We plug that
Okay.
into our projections.
And Nancy, since our financial goal is to have 8.33% ending fund balance, to get to about 8% would take about 700,000 more. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, I actually have it on
What a segue.
a few slides down. So, do you want me to finish? Can I answer your question in just a second? Yeah. So this scenario shows very little funding for capital. Decreasing the ending fund balance by 1% would provide approximately $650,000 for capital and operating budget supplemental requests. So this is the best-case scenario for supplemental requests and capital funding. This anticipates a 10% increase in consolidated tax for fiscal 16. Right now, we're at 8.34. And then a 4% increase, from 17 through 21. So this would enable us to get up to the 8.3% ending fund balance and also fund in 17, $820,000 for capital and supplemental requests. Does that?
So the difference is approximately 700,000.
Yeah. So let's see. So what's next? On May 5th, we're going to have the presentation of the capital improvement program and supplemental requests. We moved these items from this meeting in order to get a more accurate estimate of the amount of available funding in the general fund. On May 19th, we'll have the presentation and adoption of the final budget. We're no longer required to have a special meeting for this. And then June 1st is when the adopted budget has to be filed with the Department of Taxation. So this was a late material that you received in your packet. And these were the comments from the budget open house that we had on April 4th. The public was invited to provide comments regarding the proposed fiscal 17 city budgets, and the following is a recap of what we received from the public. So under Parks and Recreation, a comment was, I support immediate funding of portable restrooms, unisex and handicapped accessible in our neighborhood parks. This has been lacking for decades, as Carson prides itself on being a good place to live, to enjoy recreation. It should provide its service basic facilities. I also support including and requiring portable restroom facilities in all current and future parks, including the Lampa subdivision. Also, we need restroom facilities as part of the downtown redevelopment. The next comment was, please support the Potties in the Parks initiative for health reasons of all kinds. For the library, the comment was, I support a new library building. It's as important as public safety. I support being open on Sundays. I support new carpet. And I support increased staffing and a property tax increase to pay for it. So next, Sherry's going to go over the water, sewer, and stormwater funds. Do you have any questions on?
Any questions, anybody? Public, anybody want to weigh in? I don't see. Okay, sure.
Okay, I have a little slideshow presentation as well. Nancy's pulling it up right now.
And Sherry's sick, so.
Yeah, bear with me. I'm sorry, bear with me. Sherry Russell, Deputy Chief Financial Officer. So, as Andy Engelman wonderfully summed up, we took these tentative budgets to the Utility Financial Oversight Committee on March 15th, and they had recommended to adopt all three of the budgets. The presentation was very early in our budget process, and we did find a few corrections and adjustments, and I'll go over those in detail for you. So the first one is the sewer fund. So the tentative budget includes a 15% rate increase for capital projects effective July 1st, 2016. This is the fourth year in the 5-year implementation of that rate increase. Salaries and benefits increased, as you can see up there, in fiscal year 17 due to merits, anticipated promotions, and other benefit increases. Services and supplies actually decreased by $18,993. You should probably go forward. What are you doing? Go back. Go back. Thank you. And this was basically the internal service fund charge decreased for this fund. Basically, there's a lot of projects going on we have coming up, the downtown corridor projects and other projects. So those projects will be direct billed as opposed to through this cost allocation. So that's why a lot of these you'll see decrease in the internal service charge. And then facilities and maintenance repair increased by about $30,000 to make up that difference. We included about $18,769,000 in capital outlay, which will be funded through a combination of state revolving fund loans and then the cash from the rates. And just $15 million of that $18 million is the wastewater treatment facility project. So the majority is that. The few items that we changed, we initially had a 10% group insurance rate increase in there, and between the time we took it to the UFOC and now we have discussed, or we've been in negotiations, and we don't think that it'll be over 5%. So we did reduce that increase by half. And you'll see that in all the funds. And then there was some training pay and possible promotion adjustments that were identified after the fact as well. It ended up being $11,521. And then there was a training pay also that we had missed in fiscal year 16 that is going to be added, so $1,068. So little tweaks that were not in the original presentation, wanted to bring to your attention. The next slide is just a little recap of the different operating and system reserves that they're supposed to meet. So sewer's in good shape. First, I'll go over the blue is the operating reserve. So the minimum is 45 days reserve for operations. The goal would be 90 days. And the goal is actually the line, and where we're at is the bar. So the blue line is the goal, and you can see we meet that in 19. And then the system replacement reserve is the bar, and the goal is the line again, the gold line. And you can see in 16 we meet it. However, we're in the middle of doing a big project, and we just got a big bond. So we're going to use that bond, and that goal will again be met in 19, which is the year after the full implementation of the rates, which is what we're supposed to do. So sewer looks like it's in good shape. If there aren't any questions, we can move on to water. Leave it here for a while. So this is the water fund. The tentative budget includes a 6.5% rate increase as of July 1st, 2016. Again, this is the fourth year of the 5-year implementation. Water consumption is actually down almost 6% for 16. Therefore, there was only about a 1% increase this year in the water income from 16 to 15. And we did go ahead and project it going back to 6.5% for 17. So use water.
Sherry, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Do these projections take into account growth?
No. So
we could be bringing in more than is projected?
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so as before, the salaries and benefits increased due to merits, anticipated promotion, and other benefit increases. Services and supplies decreased this time by $559,000. That's quite a big decrease. It's basically the water meters. Last year they had They had 800,000 in water meters. This year, they're back to their just normal replacement cost, about 200,000. So that was a big 600,000 decrease in water meters. And then their facility repairs and maintenance did increase by 50,000. And then their internal service charges decreased by about 20,000. And then in this fund, we included $3,647,000 capital outlay funded through a combination of, again, state revolving fund loans and cash from rates. So in this fund, the few changes were, like I said, that group insurance, the 5% reduction from our initial estimates. And then we did have one employee that was inadvertently excluded. It was just a retirement, making it on the position control list error. And so we found it and corrected it, and we actually corrected it before we went to the UFOC meeting, so I think they're aware of it. It just wasn't in our numbers. The next slide is water consumption. And I included this simply because water consumption is struggling right now. And it seems to be a majority of it with both residential and commercial, but commercial has obviously gone down quite a bit. So we're hoping, again, this is just a drought problem, you know, and we had obviously an unusual drought this year. And we're hoping that revenue, which is the purple line there, will start to, you know, nudge up a little bit, because it seems to be flattening out, as you can see there in fiscal 16.
Is agriculture included in commercial?
I believe, I'm not sure. I'm really not. Can David Burketta answer that one? I don't know.
Yes.
It is. David Burketta said yes, it is.
That would certainly explain the drop.
Okay, so this is our kind of worst case scenario. So we took this year's numbers because, you know, water consumption is so low, and projected them out. And so this is your reserves, your operating, your system reserves projected out based on the current year scenario. So as you can see, it's pretty bad. We do make our 45-day minimum, but in later years, you can see we really don't, because we're negative that amount in the system reserve. So
These projections are based on last year's.
drought situation, yes.
And-
So,
And again, going back to if agriculture is included in those commercial numbers, and farmers got their water cut off last year, then there's a natural assumption there that that is not going to continue this year.
exactly.
And if growth is included, added to this, there's just going to be that much more in terms of your reserve.
Exactly. So if we go to the next slide, this is our best case scenario. This is the Hope Fairy. So as you can see, 16 is still pretty low, because unfortunately 16 is almost over, and it is what it is. But as 17 and 18, as we move forward, you know, we're out of the drought. Hopefully things get much better, and we have a couple good years of snow. We won't meet our reserves in 19 like we are projecting sewer, but it'll take us a couple more years, probably till 2021, to meet those reserves. So if the board is okay with, you know, taking a little longer to meet those reserves, then with this scenario, we wouldn't need to increase rates. Okay. So the stormwater drainage fund, this assumes a 0% increase for charges for services. Again, there might be some growth, but the rate's not increasing, so we're assuming that's what it's going to be for 17. Service and supplies decrease.
Sherry, can I interrupt you there?
Yes,
Isn't the
absolutely.
stormwater fee based on a per parcel fee and not on usage, so it wouldn't change?
Right.
Growth or new construction is going to change that revenue at all.
You're right, that's true. I'm sorry, I need a moment. Okay. Services and supplies decreased by about 80,000 in 2017. Again, that's basically that internal service charge. There just isn't a lot of money in this fund for capital or anything right now, so there's not a lot going on. So the internal service fund charge is just decreasing. Again, and again, a lot of those people are being directly billed to projects as well, so there's just not a lot internal service charge. Professional services increased about $20,000. We have included $583,000 in capital outlay in this fund, which was a little bit of money left over for the state revolving fund loan. And I did not do any performance measures on this one because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's no revenues to support that in this fund. The last thing were the little changes we made since the UFOC commission, and again, it's that 5% group insurance decrease, and then the increase in salaries and benefits for possible employee promotion. There was one for 2005-37 that we increased, and then in 16 we found a spreadsheet formula error that resulted in an increase of almost $13,000. So that was just a formula error. It happens. We're not perfect.
Questions, Sherry? Anybody up here? Public comments for Sherry? Anybody? All right, because we're going to take about a 5-7 minute break here, and then we'll come back with the sheriff, I think. Is that it? Start departments? Sheriff and courts? Okay. All right, so we'll be in recess until about 1:45. Everybody have a chance to chat a little bit? Okay, we're going to call the meeting of the Board of Supervisors back to order. We'll now take up the sheriff.
Good morning, how are we doing? It's
Good afternoon to
now.
you, man.
I was going to wear a tie, but we're so nice outside. And,
It is so nice.
and you guys look so well up there, so I did not. Welcome to the Sheriff's Office. Today, presenting our budget and what is going on with us is Ms. Kathy Heath and Under Sheriff Steve Albertson. I do want to take just this one moment. I know May 5th is a significant day for this board and its budgeting processes, but also on May 5th, we do have the statewide memorial for law enforcement here in Carson City, where Deputy Carl Howell's name will be etched onto that. And so as we go through our budget here today, this is not only just for you, but obviously for our home audience watching on the televisions, and we do invite them as well. It is very, very important as we go through our budget that we focus in on those strategic priorities or goals or initiatives, whatever we want to call them, that the Sheriff's Department does pursue. Obviously, they're up there on the screen, not in any particular order, but deterring crime is very critical to our organization, as well as treating people within this community and our visitors very professionally. We want to employ the best employees that we have here in Carson, and we make a great investment into that. We want to communicate with the public at every opportunity, and I do want to highlight the efficient use of the budget and our management of it. The reason that's important is when Nick, Mr. Morano, first came to us and asked us to make this presentation, this is a goal of ours, to share as much information with the public as we possibly can, and to be as transparent in our budget as we possibly can, because in fact we are using the taxpayers' money. And the Sheriff's Department as a function is kind of a consumer of the general fund. And Kathy, or Nancy, I'm sure went over it very well with you. I just tried to hit this bottom button and show you our strategic map. I'm not going to do it again because I thought we were going to crash the computer, and so we're just going to skip that altogether and kind of push forward into the budget itself. The Sheriff's Department's budget is broken into divisions, and I'm going to let Kathy kind of explain that for you, give you the overall.
At this point? Sure. The sheriff is correct. We are separated by numerous divisions, and if you're looking at the packet that I saw that Nancy gave everyone, we're going to look at this in division order. So that would be starting with tab 26 of what you guys have. I know you have a lot of tabs in there. So we'll look at each one as detailed as you'd like or as general as you'd like. We present the combined budget to you today because it doesn't really exist anywhere else. This budget of $18,400,000 is all of our general fund contributions. So this includes actually the general fund portion of our grants. It doesn't include the revenue side of those grants, but it does include the general fund expenditures of them, and that's why we like to look at it in the big picture. And in the lower left-hand corner of this slide, you'll see the per capita cost of our department. Rising. At this point, it's in the neighborhood of $329 for fiscal 17. Those numbers are based on population and overall operating numbers that I got from Nancy. And before we go further too, when I go through each individual budget, my portion will be a little bit generic. I'd like to leave as much room as possible for any questions that you guys have. Anybody who knows me knows that I have a hard time talking a brief minute about the budget, so I'm going to try that today and leave more room for questions. Okay.
This first piece of the budget is something that we put together a few years back. This is the chartered portion of the Sheriff's Office, those positions that are authorized by legislature that the sheriff can fill in order to manage the department. I introduced over here to my left Under Sheriff Steve Albertson. He is responsible for department operations. Over on my right, I have Assistant Sheriff Ken Sandage. We do have a vacant assistant sheriff position at this point in time, and so the undersheriff is fulfilling much of those responsibilities. I've already introduced our fiscal chief, Ms. Kathy Heath. In our audience today, we do devote a chief to our career development that does strive for that professionalism. which does, in fact, save the city an enormous amount of money as we pursue that avenue. And Ms. Christine Tuttle, we're going to talk about a little bit further on into the budget about some of the progresses that we've made this year. In a perfectly aligned world, if there was so much money available, we just didn't know what to do with it, I would have all 6 positions filled, as we had previous to the 2010 budget cuts. But we do have to adjust with the priorities of the community and the priorities of our functions that are going on inside the community. So the world's never perfect, and we are constantly adjusting to those needs. So as we go through this budget, please keep in mind those priorities. They're up there on the screen in yellow as a reminder that these are the things that we are driving to achieve.
The first division is our chartered, as the sheriff mentioned, our charter division. This budget of $1 million over fiscal 16 budgeted amount is actually an increase of about $24,000 or so, and that's due on the salary side to merit increases and also to a retirement. There's payoff information in there on a retirement. This budget represents not what's authorized by the charter, but what's funded.
The one vacant position is what you're...
The assistant sheriff.
Okay.
Yes, the assistant sheriff position is vacant right now. I would hope to be able to get back to that, but right now some current priorities in the current fiscal year are taking precedence. Our next division that we're going to discuss is our administration division. It is the smallest of all divisions within the department as a result of alignments. This division does take care of our mandated or legislatively directed coroner's functions, as well as our prevention programs that are very active in the community, our clerical support, and budgetary needs within the department.
On the budget side for the administration division, the budget of $1 million you'll see there is actually a decrease of $76,000 over the current year, and that again has in part to do with the retirement and realignment of personnel. And it also has to do with a major shift that we're doing in some of our intermediate divisions. We're moving a lot of funding to those other divisions, so to make those programs more true. For example, training. We're moving training into each of the other divisions, and that will give us a better picture of what those individual programs cost.
Next division to discuss is our investigations division. It has grown considerably over the last 10 years, not necessarily in new FTEs to the city, but realignment of resources to make them more and most efficient as possible. The span of control of this division includes our detectives, who average over 100 cases a year. We've just did a wrap-up yesterday to check our numbers. Our average run time for a case closure is running right at about 2 months. That's been consistent over the last many years, and we hope to maintain that standard. Our property evidence room vault is maintained out of this division, along with our forensic laboratory. Our specialized enforcement, which most of you know as our SET team, is run out of this division. We do have a Tri-County Gang Unit, which is grant-funded, as well as our Tri-Net Narcotics Task Force, and administrative support to the division. We are piloting one program right now this year. We're about 6 months into it, where we have one dedicated person to a federal task force that is operating in the area. We are continuing to monitor that for payback, in other words, return on the dollar. We hope that we can come to you in the future and expand on that. This division has been extraordinarily busy in the past year with some very major cases, including several that have incorporated operations from Washoe County, Douglas County, Lyon County all together. And we have entered into some agreements that pull the State Division of Investigations into the bag as well. So it is a very active division. I would point out to you, if I can get this thing to work right, this is a key indicator that we follow. The number of cases that our patrol division is actively engaging in on the streets, through our automated systems, they end up being referred over to investigations. Our investigations management team siphons through those and will end up assigning those cases. The two brown steady lines across the screen indicate what I expect to occur. We are staying within that. You obviously see a spike in the 2014 timeframe up just across 2015, but I'm satisfied that the caseload that is coming from our patrol division over into investigations is being held at a level that we hope to continue to see. Oops, sorry, Kathy.
That's all right. On the financial side for our investigations division, this budget of $2,300,000 represents an increase of about $54,000 over fiscal 16's budget. That is primarily salaries and contractual increases based on the bargaining unit agreements. This, however, is the only division that has any actual new money in it, and that is a little over $20,000, and that is primarily for our contract that we have with the Washoe County Crime Lab. Other than that, any new money that it looks like it appears in the divisions is actually movements from other divisions over here. As the sheriff said, this division provides functional supervision over two grants, our regional regional gang unit grant and our regional Trinet task force. Both of those grants are on the federal fiscal cycle. We do the best to predict what the feds are going to give us in October, and we're doing that now, actually. We're in the process of doing that right now.
Near and dear to most people is our operations division, otherwise known as your patrol division, and that's what our community sees the most often, or has the most often interaction with law enforcement officers out there. They've been very, very busy over the past year, and I will highlight the calls for service. What predictions we might be able to make as to the future, along with the growth in the community. I know we're looking at the Schultz Ranch as well as others that are going to bring on a larger caseload. I think that we can anticipate it. There is a fall off in that green line at the right. I would ask you to ignore that fallout. There's a reason for it, and we're going to get to it. But we can anticipate, as the population and the housing areas grow in Carson City, so will the demand for services. When we get to employing the best law enforcement officers that we can possibly field, we are doing extraordinarily well, probably better than on a statewide, well, surely better than on a statewide average. We now average about 10 years longevity. The average officer arriving at the scene of your house, while he may look young, it's probably because we're growing older. Our average tenure is about 10 years. 36% of those officers have advanced degrees, and their career certifications have gone up in the last 10 years from 6% to over 65%. So we are fielding better certified, better capable, more professional officers than we ever have before. Along that path, we have reorganized our SWAT team to the standards for the National Tactical Officers Association, and near and dear to some of the conversation that we had on earlier, it's just been over the last couple of months that we've really turned into high gear a program called MOST. I think it was in the Nevada Appeal today. Our MOST program is a mobile outreach program that is targeting mental health. We opt to provide as many services before crisis intervenes. And this program is moving very, very effectively. MOST, along with FAST and the other agencies that cooperate with us, such as the Health and Human Services, both at the county level and the state level, have taken on leaps and bounds at addressing problems, and instead of working in silos and protecting the information, but by sharing information and resources, we have been able to have some great successes in those areas of mental health. And I would chime in that Carson City is probably the leader in this region as far as those activities that are expanding now well into most of the other rural counties. Yes, ma'am.
Kenny, so are you saying that in the mental health arena, we're actually able to provide better service to the client and reduce the stay of mental health issues in the jail? Is it a twofold success?
It is a twofold success. The FAST program is primarily, and I will be mentioning that here in a few minutes, the FAST program is targeting the jail environment. I don't believe that we do a mental health patient any service whatsoever by jailing them, regardless of the offense. Now, and maybe that should be taken loosely. Very often you look at the offense and say, well, that's jailable. Well, is that really the root cause? So over the past, let's call it 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years, along with that jail inmate reduction that we witnessed very early on when we implemented the FAST program, the MOST program targets people before they get in crisis, before they end up into a jail environment. And it has been extraordinarily successful at preventing those repeat offenders from coming back into the jail environment. And I have to say, most notably, in and out of the emergency room, consuming resources needlessly. So the MOST program is really that proactive effort going into people's homes and taking every step that we can to prevent those catastrophes from happening. I have met with most of you, and I do want to bring this up because there's an awful lot of chatter about it, and that's traffic accidents. Traffic accidents have become a major concern for a lot of things here in Carson City. We do not have a funded traffic management unit. Back in 2010, in order to meet our staffing levels, we abolished the traffic exclusive management philosophy. We have adjusted to a secondary function. Up on the screen, you'll see the 36-month trend of accidents. It's notable although it grabs the most amount of press, our injury accidents, those things that are really tearing up our families on the streets, they are on a decline. And to say that is to say that our streets are somewhat safer. I know that we've had a bad year. We've had several lost in crosswalks and such, but as we look at the overall trend, we are doing better with our traffic management. On the non-injury side of the accidents, that's your lower fender bender type accidents, we're doing not so well. Now, I'm going to give you a little of the positive side. One could offer up that suggests that speeds are lower. And I know that your constituents contact you constantly about the speeders in town and the people running up and down the roadways. Well, the fact of the matter is the reduction in injury level accidents, and injuries are probably very heavily attributable to the speeds. This would suggest that our speeds are lower, but we still have a lot of work to do. Our accidents as an overall are on the incline. That does take an awful lot of labor, and that does impact our ability to get to our calls for service on a regular basis. So we do have to pay attention to that. We will have the discussion. I'm not sure how Nick's going to want to do this, but it is going to be a necessary discussion, probably within the next year, probably within the next 6 months, about this board's view of body-worn cameras. Body-worn cameras are trending towards law enforcement all the way across the country, and to some degree they are a very good item of tending to business. However, it's going to be expensive, and there is no underscore to that. It's going to be expensive. The appetite of this board to fund that type of activity will need to be discussed. We do have cameras, body-worn cameras on several of our officers, especially for specific functions, but as a general rule, the officer arriving at your home or taking an incident out on the street is not expected to have one on. This is a discussion we need to have. I anticipate a pretty substantial impact if we as a community want our officers to be wearing cameras, and I would suggest to you as an end to that statement, probably the surveillance of the system, the data that is retained, is going to be one of the most intensive pieces of the program.
how can we protect the privacy of people when an officer is walking into their homes and that camera is there. So we have lots of work to do. We are following very closely the Las Vegas Metro, who is advancing a program on their own, as well as Nevada Highway Patrol, who's advancing a program under the umbrella of the state legislature. So we are watching both of those very, very closely.
Does any law enforcement in Nevada carry the cameras now, or having them in operation except what you just mentioned? Any?
Quite a few of our agencies throughout the state have cameras. I have long said that the most challenging piece is not the camera itself, it's the policy and the retention of those views. For Kathy to call me and say there's a problem in your house and for me to enter, I've now entered your private area. And with that camera on, it really has to be monitored very closely as to what we do and how we retain and what we make available, those pieces of information. Agencies are working very, very well towards establishing systems or paid personnel, FTE, to be able to monitor that data and extract those things where your privacy is to that higher degree.
Ken, can I just ask a question related to that? The Department of Alternative Sentencing has them. So how does your regulation differ from that in terms of privacy?
I've not compared ours to theirs. We have assigned this function over to Captain Melvin, and with our patrol division, he's tracking not only the cost of the equipment, but those two agencies that I mentioned on how they're developing their policies and practices. Metro has a tremendous advantage to an assortment of lawyers that are very, very good at filtering through all of these steps. I think that Nevada Highway Patrol, its activities will be significant to us because we share the same building, and very often by sharing and working together, sometimes you can cut down those costs. By and large, most of the agencies in the state do not have full-on, most of the law enforcement agencies, police, sheriff type, do not have full body camera coverages. They've just not reached that level.
Our operations division is our largest division in our department, so it's no surprise that it also has the largest budget, which then also equates to the largest increase. The increase in this budget is about $450,000 over the top. This budget, as the sheriff said, does provide functional supervision over our Cops in Schools grant. And this is one grant that we fortunately can predict what our increases are going to be in the future. That's a blended rate between 2 fiscal years, again, because it's on the federal fiscal cycle, but we know what the impact of that is going to be over the next couple of years, and we're accounting for that.
Kathy, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
With regards to that, $391,000 is overtime.
Yes.
So is it less expensive to hire another officer as opposed to, putting in the overtime? I mean, how does that all equate out?
Well, and I can let the sheriff, I believe we just happen to have a chart showing that, that we have many different categories of overtime that we capture. And there's certain types of overtime that will never go away regardless of how much money we have. Court appearances and extradition. There's certain things that we have. It's the one on your right. There you go. This is our overtime numbers through February, rather. And this is for the whole department.
When it comes to the expense of the overtime, the two major categories that are causing overtime in both our detention environment as well as the patrol division operations side of the house is minimum manning and training. We cannot shortcut the training. We're doing more with fewer people, as the cliche goes, so we cannot shortcut that. We have looked at that minimum manning level up for every 10 hours that is done, that is completed. 1 hour is committed at overtime on both sides of the house. The overtime is an operational necessity or discussion that we may have to have down the road. Much of what we have done with the board here over the last I'm going to call it 5 years, has been functionally directed, such as SROs. We brought on 3 officers. They became a functional responsibility. That doesn't affect the overtime. At some point, when you continue to mount those overtime hours in, then you degrade your ability of those officers to do their jobs well. And so it's not purely a discussion based on money. I can tell you this, it is probably almost never opportunity that our overtime budget is going to come in below. We exceed it every single year. And I don't anticipate that that's going to change. So there will be a time when we're going to have the operational discussion, as we have with the finance office and IFC in the past, where we have to do a bump in overtime. But we do have mechanisms within the department to track those other things that excessive overtime can cause, such as use of force incidents out on the street, complaints about officers' activities, those things that you might expect when an officer is being worn down because he's working too much, and that's the bottom line. He's just working too much. We do monitor on a regular basis, 85% commitment by the officers. What that means is that, consistent with the Public Safety Master Plan, that's dated, somewhat dated, but we do revalidate the information on a regular basis. We expect about 85% of the time an officer is in his position that he's employed to do. As a result of minimum manning, very often that is exceeded, and we struggle in those environments. Not to make a plug for staffing, but a reality, when you bring on a new officer, it is likely to take upwards of 6 months before that officer is usable. He's trained, he's certified by the state, and we can let him off and go have him do his job. The ability of our staffing levels previous to the 2010 cuts allowed us to absorb some of that. Today, we don't have that. When we have a vacancy, we ask Sharon to fill that vacancy as fast as possible in order to get that labor force back. Does that answer your question? Now if I can just figure out how to get back.
Minimize. There you go.
That little arrow that goes backwards.
Wow, it went all the way back to the beginning.
General services, you're on.
Next up, we're going to talk about general services, another function of the sheriff himself. That to this conversation, that is our Civil and Records Division of the office. This slide has our fiscal year July through December totals. You can see that the division actually services about 4,000 people a year, and covers our programs that include our sex offender registration, felon registration, concealed weapons permits, protective orders, garnishments, and I do note that under garnishments as a state capital, we do handle all of the state employee garnishments statewide, so it's a tremendous workload on us. All of our records management, our permits and other activities. This division is heavily tasked. And again, I come back to you with a forecast for the future. As this year winds down, as the fiscal year winds down, it is anticipated that the Adam Walsh Act is probably going to be implemented. We have roughly about 300 sex offenders that we track here on a regular basis in Carson City. The Adam Walsh Act is going to absolutely barrel us with a workload. Our three-tier system of tracking sex offenders will be erased, and an entirely new system will be placed on board, which will include a dramatic increase in the requirements for registration coming in to be fingerprinted, DNA samplings, and so on. This, I believe, is going to have a tremendous impact. As it rolls out, we are in very close contact with the state, making sure that we are communicating back and forth and that we're preparing for it. But I do see that 4,000 number going up tremendously, specifically as a result of the Adam Walsh Act.
But isn't that that number going up would be beneficial, would it not? I mean, that's the increase of what you're processing would be beneficial for law enforcement, would it not?
I think that's what's been tied up in the court system. Is it beneficial or not? The entire sex offender type of program, which is run from at the state level and trickles on down to the county, is being rewritten. We will no longer have a Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 type sex offender format. It's going to be a what is it, FDR format of frequency of reporting. And that frequency is going to be dramatically increased. Will it allow us better access or better knowledge within the community of where these sex offenders are located? Probably so, because they're reporting more often. What we have done just over the past several weeks is looked at our processes to streamline those and make sure that we're not taking steps that we don't need to do, because the efficiency of that registration is going to be critical to that volume of workload, which equates to labor and manpower.
If I may, if you can go back one slide, while you're talking about the...
Sure, you think I can.
Good luck. The registration of the sex offender, is that public knowledge? Is that, or public information? Or is that...
The registrations are done at a county level, and they're fed up to the state. There is, through the three-tier system, there is public notice designed or embedded in each of those categories. I should say the level of public notice. We have, I think, two or three of our current major categories, but we do work closely with our school environments, predominantly where children are at, to make sure that those people where children are congregated have adequate information to be able to protect themselves, as well as putting out that information through our website, through our Facebooks, and so on.
And then on the concealed weapons permit, is that, what length, is that just in this year? Or how, what number is that total?
That's just in the first 6 months.
Just the first 6 months?
Yes.
Within Carson City only, right? 300?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Are those the ones granted or the ones applying?
We are a shall issue state. There are very few applications that will ever get to me that are not issued. Very, very few. We are a shall issue state.
Thank you. This budget in the General Services Division of $608,000 is actually a reduction over under fiscal 16. We did some realignments of some positions that moved out of this division and into the detention facility, so it's reduced. But I should say, since the sheriff made a comment about the different types of work that this division does, they do generate revenue, and that's pursuant to NRS 258. 125. And that revenue comes from civil fees, the service of civil papers, summons and complaints, and other types of court documents that are served.
On to the detention division. This is a very, very active division within the department. Obviously, it's not seen that much by the public, but it is a heavy program. From the booking level, and I look at that as somewhat of a in and out. You'll see a disparity. There's about 3,000, 3,500 people are booked into our facility every year. Double that process, because we hope that everybody who comes in actually goes out. So our facility is very, very active. We do have challenges inside of it. And this is the most significant one right here. When we look at the population, average daily population of the facility, it is growing dramatically. This chart represents back to 2003, where we were shortly after that facility was built and the courthouse established. Most new facilities across the country, wherever you build a jail, you build a courthouse along with it. It's a very expensive venture for communities. I have a personal drive to see to it that whenever that population inside the facility reaches an 80% capacity, that we have 2 officers. Right now, we're currently only staffed for 1, but that we have 2 officers on the floor at all times. We've not been able to achieve that. most of that, again, we come back to, that pot of money is not endless, and so we have to use other means to control that. But you can see by the red line, the average population inside that jail is growing dramatically over the years. The current ability is to house 244 inmates.
Ken,
yes, sir.
The Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is looking at revising and revamping pre-sentence bail, pre-litigation bail issues, with the thought that there's a growing concern around the country that bail is only available to certain segments of society and the rest go to jail while they're awaiting either a plea or whatever. And so I think what that goal is to, one, reevaluate, whether the bail system actually works, and two, to do an analysis by the judges as to which ones of these folks really need bail or which can be let out, with the idea of trying to reduce the jail population. Of course, on the other side, it hits the alternative sentencing folks. But I think we're going to see our court system make some moves along those lines as it relates to bail for, arrests and things of that nature. So,
I think you're absolutely correct, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that those decisions are coming sooner versus later. To the credit of Carson City, is our alternative sentencing program. There has long been a philosophy, working with the courts and alternative sentencing, that an inmate not be held in jail just because he does not have the means. Because the reality of it is, many people do struggle from day to day to get by, and they end up in a jail environment and an inability to post that bail when all other things set aside, they're not either a risk to society or a risk to themselves. But they do end up in the jail environment. So alternative sentencing does have a process and is continuing to review that. We have long been doing that with our best efforts to make sure that people are not being held purely because they don't have the ability to post a bail. And I think that's a credit to Carson. That is one means of holding down that inmate population. Right now, we're running at about, I think the slide said about 50 days in jail is the average stay. Those are challenges for the community. And yes, I do anticipate some dramatic informations or policies coming out in the not too distant future. I don't do this for your entertainment, but I will tell you that this is a typical type of an incident that will occur in that environment. You see an inmate stand up inside the jail. These incidents happen very rapidly. The onset of a fight, injuries do occur. They are tremendously costly to the city. We are responsible for their care. This is an indirect indirect supervision facility, so it becomes very, very difficult to absorb all of those costs when many of the costs that are coming at us we're not in control over. Moving along, Kathy. How about you?
I'm good. On the budget side for our detention facility, this budget that you're seeing here of a little over $4,100,000 is actually a decrease. The reason for that seems a little bit odd, but the reason for that has indirectly associated with the Cops and Schools grant and how we allocated personnel when we got that grant. As the sheriff mentioned, I think you mentioned, this budget provides functional supervision over the commissary, but the commissary budget is not included in there, and we can discuss commissary if you'd like, but at this point we're just sticking with the general funds.
As I move over to dispatch, I did overlook one thing, and I will give an attaboy over to the city because I'm not sure exactly where it's supposed to go to. Our building maintenance folks did a considerable upgrade at juvenile detention as well as the sheriff's office on our jail locking systems. This board allowed us funds to expand our video surveillance. You just saw an example of it. Those things help us reduce costs. Those things are tremendous opportunities. Along that path, the next division is our Public Safety Communications Division. Very, very active. I'm going to let Kathy touch on the processes of our $1 million project that we just are, call it 95% through. Our dispatchers are doing an excellent job here in the community of handling the activities that are going on, if I can get this thing going correctly. But we are seeing, even though the population has declined somewhat in Carson City over the years, our call volume is continuing to grow, and our dispatchers are handling it. We expect that growth to continue. Again, back to the new housing, as we bring more and more population into the city, I think that we can use these indicators as a crystal ball into where we're headed, and do we have sufficient number of fire, police, paramedics, water, sewer, all of these things to handle that volume of the work. There are 19 dispatchers out there and one facility manager. Approximately 90% of the labor and 70% of the call volume is ending up in the sheriff's office lap, and they are dealing with it. I will let Kathy hit the Tiburon Tri-Tech project, but a major challenge coming at this board, probably in the not too distant future, it may be mentioned here as we go through this budget towards the end, the overall budget, our radio infrastructure system in Carson City is in dire need. And I make that plug because within the next couple of years, we are going to have to, we are absolutely going to have to make some improvements to the radio infrastructure that services all of the departments here in Carson and improve that capability of communicating.
On the budget side, our communications center, our budget is just under $2 million for this division. For fiscal 17, that's an increase of about $60,000, and that's 100% due to contractual increases on the salary side. The sheriff mentioned our Tiburon project. As everyone knows, we just went through a major upgrade to Tiburon, a very long process. Awful lot of work went into that process. Our budget was $1.2 million. We're very close to the end of it. We did go live, and we were on time, and we will be under budget. Not by a lot under budget, but we'll be under by a little. And I think it's important to note, though, in terms of the budget, that we started this project, $1.2 million, with zero contingency. So really, any dollar under budget is a win for everyone. So we're looking forward to that, but we will be completed with that financially probably 30 to 60 days from now.
That does affect that vacant position. We opted to bring on Christine Tuttle and assist Karen Ratchek. The two of them have led the conversion project all the way through. It has impacted the entire department. We had to retrain everybody and give up a lot of vacation time and so on. But we have an enormously valuable platform that is taking care of our fire, taking care of the police, taking care of the paramedics, and I'm very, very pleased with it. Which kind of leads me to the next. If you were to strip away all of the factors, all of the key performance indicators, all of the targeting systems that we manage, we look at our crime rate in our community as a major indicator of where we're headed. And before you on the slide up here is our crime rate for Carson City as established by the state of Nevada since 1994. We have seen it continually declining. That's a good thing. That's everyone working very, very closely here in the community. I come back to capital. We are forced with a mandate that is coming down at us. It will surely be implemented within the next 3 to 5 years that we convert from uniform crime reporting to another system known as NIBRS. That's a national incident-based reporting system. We are absolutely on top right now, trying to work. We are working with the state to gather sufficient information and data to project what the cost of this implementation is going to run us. It will be heavy. Right now, every county in the state of Nevada is operating off uniform crime reporting. We will all be switched over to NIBRS, and there's going to be a cost associated with that. Normally, we come back to you with capital. That seems to be a tough word nowadays, but it's capital, capital, capital. These are costs that we don't have any control over. But as a community, the slide does suggest we are getting better. I do want to make note, because I always love this slide here. This is a philosophy, not just not of mine, but one that I've followed for many, many years. Those things that affect crime in a community are not always associated with police. You don't hire more police to reduce crime, because that's not always going to work. In fact, those conditions that are up on the screen right now, those parks that reduce crime, those libraries, those other activities that better suit us in our community, which makes people want to move here, those are very often the same things that reduce crime. And so you folks are tasked with hard decisions. Do I fund that one new officer, or do I fund that fix on the library so that somebody else, a young man or a young girl, is going to come in and study and go on and be a professional? So we have many, many things facing in front of us, and we do want to continue to drive that crime down, making this a safer community. But we are forced with challenges, such as what Karen brought up. How far can we go until we have to make major adjustments? And virtually in conclusion, kind of almost a final, we do have outstanding performers. Lieutenant Brian Humphrey of our investigation division was our Supervisor of the Year. As we strive to meet those the best employees possible, Lieutenant Humphrey will be attending the FBI National Academy this summer. Deputy Kip Lee was our Outstanding Deputy of the Year. Jason Olson, our Civilian Employee of the Year. Jason was just a tremendous find out of Florida, I believe it was. Came in and has just done wonders for our crime scene investigations. And our Civilian of the Year, Shirley. I'm gonna make a plug, Shirley Gibson, for all of our volunteers. The Sheriff's Office could not do the job that we are doing in this community without the volunteerism that is going on. We have more volunteers than we have employees, and they are out there every day on the street. They're doing traffic management, they're doing traffic control, they do home watches, they're doing reception activities at the office. They're doing many of the things that, but for them, I would be coming to you and asking for FTEs to perform those functions. And so whether it's in the jail environment or out there on the street, our volunteers are just absolutely saviors of the world. Next week is National Telecommunications Week from April 10th to April 16th. Mr. Mayor, I don't think you and I need a big, long thing to recognize all of the dispatchers. I get a little choked up when I talk about them because they have a tough job. They have an enormously tough job. And we see dispatch agencies struggling all the way across the country to maintain their staffs, maintain their people, and provide that service for the community that we somewhat take for granted because we don't see them all the time. But Karen is here in the room, and she's here representing all the rest of them. So that's the Sheriff's Office.
Well, this is good. Well done presentation. Questions of Kenny? Public questions of Kenny? Comments up here to us? Not any public comments? Well, Sheriff, and this goes for Max too on the court system. There's case law out there that says, if you need money, and the court's the same thing, that you could actually direct us to do that. In a nutshell, that's kind of what it says. It takes a great deal of cooperation, and not all counties have that type of cooperation between the cops, the courts, and the board, where, they each have independent ways of going about, standing on their own 2 feet or asking for money. And so, we're blessed here to be able to have people who work within the system with us because, you've never, nor have the courts ever stood up and said, you either do this or, we're going to sue you. But I think you probably have that right. think you probably have that right to do that.
I do.
Yeah, I don't get any ideas.
Well, in the sheriff's case, they have guns too, Mr. Mayor.
But, it goes to the courts too, and I think, so it's difficult. I know when we go through a budget, when you tell us this is what you need, this is, it's not easy. We're not here to, at least I'm not here to second guess what you say, because at the end of the day, you're the driver who tells me what you need. And, if I were to tell you no, you've got the right to Kroll and say, Kroll, you know what? Go rethink that one. Okay.
Well, I appreciate the comment, and no, I didn't know I could sue you, but that's okay. I don't plan on it.
You have to get your own.
No, I'm having fun. What you're saying does come back to what a lot of people don't see, and that's the cooperative nature of not just the sheriff's office and the DA's office and the courts, but all the way through the city. Just yesterday, our range masters were working very closely with juvenile probation on major changes that juvenile is working through. I can pick up the phone at any time of the day or night, and this is stuff that happens every day, and call on Curtis Horton and have traffic diverted from locations here in town. Because we work together throughout this entire city, all of the departments, we really do hold down those costs and not stack up and, okay, we have 3 or 4 cops in standby. No, you're not wasting the money. You're creating an efficiency by working closer together. And so my compliments to everybody that's worked with us over the time, and yes, you're right. This is a great place to work.
Good, thanks. Okay, folks, we're going to have Max come up, and then I'd ask the board if, we're going to have department heads here, kind of get an idea of which department heads you want to have up. I mean, we'll try and get as far as we can today, and then I think Supervisor Bagwell had a pretty good idea. If we can get some ideas of what issues we want to drill down on, we might be able to pass the budget with the exception of those issues, and then take those issues up on May 5th when we do the CIP budget. So that's kind of the game plan. If we can't do it, we can't do it, but try and get there. So Max, come on up. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. For the record, Max Cortez, Court Administrator.
Good to see the third branch of government here.
It's been quite a while, and I'm happy to see everyone and appreciate the opportunity to come and present to you. I put together a PowerPoint presentation for you, hopefully a brief one. And I want to apologize because some of the information may be elementary, or you may know the information, but I thought it was a great opportunity to give an oversight of the judicial system here in Carson City. So hopefully I won't bore you too much. Did you want to say something?
Let me just chime in, Mr. Mayor, because you mentioned case law and lawsuits, so I felt the need to come up. No, actually just touched on exactly what I had hoped to kind of preface the court's presentation with, and that is that, historically, Carson City, the city side of it, and the courts have always enjoyed basically a model relationship in terms of the budget. They get the funding that they need to fulfill their constitutional function, and when the time came for the city to ask them to participate in those mandatory budget cuts, they did that. But as you say, that is certainly not the case across the board, across jurisdictions in Nevada. You can see some examples where that hasn't happened. The primary litigation that resulted, that sort of leads the thinking on this is the City of Sparks versus the Sparks Municipal Court, where they actually went to the they filed lawsuits against each other and went to the Supreme Court. So we do have some guidance in terms of the relationship between the city's legislative branch and the courts on budget issues. You absolutely, as the legislative branch, have authority over the budget. You have the authority to review the budget that's submitted, to require that information be submitted to you. But when you review the budget of the courts in particular, you're reviewing the budget of a separate, co-equal, independent branch of government. So they're sort of in a different boat than, say, looking at public works budget, where you certainly have all the authority to go through line by line. And I'll just read a couple quotes to sort of frame the authority of this board on that. Courts must receive funding that is reasonable and necessary to carry out their powers and duties in the administration of justice. And additionally, once their budget is allocated, courts have authority to, quote, make independent financial decisions as to how to allocate the funds within that budget pursuant to their inherent authority to manage their internal affairs. So that's just sort of the legal standard that's applicable to their budget review.
Said it better than I said it, but bottom line is, we know what the bottom line is. But okay, Max, thank you. Go. I mean, just give us the highlights.
I did want to say that I've worked in the court system for about 25 years, and this has been an awesome experience working in Carson City for 10 years. And I wouldn't go back to California. That's where I came from. I worked in 2 counties in California, and this has been the great experience, as well as working as a partnership with the city and all of the different departments. It's been an absolute honor and blessing. So with that, I also wanted to introduce Karen Fisher. She's our Fiscal Services Manager. And so if you need clarification or if I need some help, I'm going to defer to her. So the first slide on the screen is the beautiful Carson City Courthouse, and that was built in 1999. And in that facility is the First Judicial District Court, as well as the Carson City Justice Municipal Court. Prior to that facility being built, they were in 2 separate locations, and that is a tremendous opportunity because we write a lot of grants, and we can refer to that Carson City Courthouse as a regional justice center. In that facility as well is the district attorney's office, the clerk recorder's office, alternative sentencing, and there's an office there for advocates and domestic violence. And it's very efficient. If we have an issue, I can walk down the hall and talk to Jason, or go down the hall and talk to Chief Fletcher. It's very efficient for all of us to be there. So right down the street on 5th and Solomon is the juvenile court and the juvenile detention facility. And the judicial officer that presides over the juvenile court cases and additional cases under the district court is Kimberly O'Casey, and she's appointed by the district court judges, and she reports directly to them. I'm not sure. And then adjacent to the building is Juvenile Probation Services, and Chief Ben Bianchi is here today in the audience. And he is appointed by the district court judges and reports directly to them. The services that are provided by Juvenile Probation Services, those services the district court judges are responsible for those services. So just a brief history. In 2006, the district court judges and justice municipal court judges had a vision, and their vision was to consolidate administration. Instead of having 2 administrators, they wanted 1 administrator. They came to the board in 2006, I believe in October, and presented what their goals and outlined things that their new court administrator was going to be working on to accomplish. And I was very lucky, and as I said, I'm very honored to be having been selected by the judges in November of 2006, and have been working very hard the last 10 years trying to reach all of those goals. And Karen has been a really huge part of that process. She has 22 years with the courts. So the first thing we did is we consolidated 4 general fund budgets into 1, and we did that for the purpose of really being able to maximize the funding, identify and track the expenditures. As I've said, being in the same facility, we've been able to apply for joint grant funding. We've shared projects to enhance services to the public. We've also pulled court-restricted funding to meet court needs, and I'll talk a little bit more about what the court-restricted funding is. An example, though, is some of you attended the open house of the new courtroom last year, and that was all court-restricted funding. It also allows for consistent policy and procedures, performance management, staff training, development, as well as succession planning. And it allows for cross-training between the courts. So we've been pretty busy. So has it worked? I'd say a resounding yes, it has worked. The judges had a great vision. And we, the courts share 6 staff. As I said, myself, Karen, 1 technology project coordinator, 2 fines and fees staff, and a court interpreter. And our responsibilities have grown since '06. We assist not only the district justice and municipal court, we also assist the juvenile court as well as the probation department. When we consolidated and hit the fiscal crisis, to be a good partner with the city, there were 3 positions that were terminated in 2010 when the tax revenues plummeted. And we also suspended an administrative service position in 2010. So the annual general fund savings since then is $391,139. That's conservative because if those individuals would have stayed in those positions, they would have received merits, insurance costs would have risen. I'm not here to ask you for that reinstatement of that suspended position today, but I will say that sometime in the future, we would like to have that position reinstated, and not this budget year. There was 1 full-time chief of security position, and that position was terminated, and those duties were given to Chief Tad Fletcher, and that was through an agreement between the city and the courts and alternative sentencing. That position was budgeted at $71,990, $31,990 went back to the general fund, $40,000 went into alternative sentencing. The 2 full-time fines and fees positions were moved under the court's budget in 2012, and that was a huge opportunity for us to be able to implement in-house collections for our district court, and they've been doing a phenomenal job. And please ask me any questions if you have any. So that is our organizational chart. You'll see the judges at the top. The district court judges, Judge Russell, Judge Wilson, their responsibilities and their personal staff. They're responsible for juvenile court, juvenile probation detention in Story County. Both of those judges will attend court in Story County for hearings. And then our justice and municipal court judges have their marshals. And I'm smack there right in the middle there. And below me is all of our different areas. So a little bit about the First Judicial District Court. We have 2 district court judges. They are state-funded positions. Those positions aren't paid for by the general fund. They're responsible for district court in Carson City and Story County. They oversee juvenile court, juvenile probation services and detention, family law. All of you can read that. Divorce, custody, termination of parental rights, adoptions, paternity, probate, estates, guardianship, conservatorship, criminal, felonies, and gross misdemeanors, civil cases over $10,000, temporary protection orders, writs that are challenges, inmate litigation for 3 Nevada Department of Correction facilities, state initiatives, referendum, petition litigation, which are ballot questions, ballot challenges, challenges to state statutes, administrative regulations, appeals from justice court, administrative review of state agency decisions, the Public Utility Commission, personnel, workers' comp, and taxation. So they are pretty busy.
They're going to get busy, right? They're going to get busier, right, Fred?
Yeah.
Okay.
And in the juvenile court, as I said, Special Master Kimberly Ocasey not only presides over juvenile delinquency cases, but also juvenile traffic, juvenile protection orders. She does juvenile dependency, which are very sad cases. Those are children who have been neglected or abused, who have been removed from the homes for alternative placement. She also does child support matters. The time spent on these matters are reimbursed by the state. We track 100% of her time. and as well as the judicial clerk, and I will be coming back to you in about 3 to 4 weeks. We are working on the budget. We have about $24,000 to $25,000 that comes back to the general fund for the time and effort of the special master and the judicial clerks. She's also in charge of the family mediation program, which handles child custody and visitation. Those are in a hope to resolve those disputes in an amicable manner with the parties. Also the civil arbitration program, and that's civil cases not in excess of $50,000. She also has 2 specialty courts, which I'll talk a little bit more about our specialty courts, the juvenile drug court and the family first program. So she's busy too. These are our new case filings for year-to-year comparison, and I included Story County. In our Carson City Justice and Municipal Court, everything we do at the courts is governed by the NRS, Nevada Revised Statutes. In the statutes, there are 2 judges that are required to preside over justice and municipal court matters in Carson City. I like to say that you get 4 judges for 2 judges for 4 judges, I should say, because in most counties in Nevada, you have a municipal court and a justice court. You have separate judges, separate staff, but here they wear 2 hats, and it works pretty darn efficient. They have court hearings are held Monday through Friday. Each judge rotates every other month and reviews probable cause determinations. And as the sheriff was alluding to, the defendants who are arrested on the weekends, they make sure that there's enough probable cause to hold them in custody. They will also make, at times, determination to release them for different reasons. Each judge is on call 24 hours per day for temporary protection orders, arrests, and search warrants. They're averaging now about 3 to 5 per week, so if you see them and they've got little bags under their eyes, they probably got a call at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Each judge also performs marriages. The judges and myself, we share 1 full-time assistant, and most judges throughout the state have their own personal assistant, but we share. In Carson City Justice Municipal Court, all of the criminal cases start in Justice Court. So the unfortunate alleged murder that occurred, that started in the Justice Court. Civil cases up to $10,000. The legislature this last session, they have increased the jurisdiction to $15,000 beginning January of 2017. So may have a slight increase. Small claims up to $10,000, temporary protection and stalking harassment orders, traffic, as well as evictions. And I put the civil cases, the civil protection order, small claims, and evictions, I lumped those together. You will see a decline from 2013 to 2015. We are anticipating an increase when that jurisdictional change occurs. That's not isolated to Carson City. That is a statewide trend for a civil decline. In our criminal, you note it's 2,372 and 13, and that is now climbing up. Our traffic has dramatically declined way back to 2012, which I didn't have those numbers on there, but that is also a statewide trend. And we primarily receive our traffic, the bulk of them, from the Nevada Highway Patrol as well as the Sheriff's Office. And other agencies, we have Fish and Game and Tribal, very minimal compared to the Nevada Highway Patrol and the Sheriff's Office. But that, again, has had a significant decrease. Any questions? So one of the greatest things that we do in our courts is our specialty courts, and these are non-traditional courts, and they have a team approach. And I will talk a little bit more in detail about the courts. But it's not the traditional defendant goes before the judge and then they get sentenced to jail or prison. These are the non-traditional role of the judge. He works with the team. You could have the DA, public defender, sheriff's office, alternative sentencing, treatment providers, clinicians, psychologists. They're sitting around a table and they are discussing the best treatment plan for the defendant. And the whole point and goal of these programs is to break the cycle of abuse and addiction. And if it's a mental health court, to have that person stabilize and be a productive member of society, get on the right medications. Go ahead.
I actually do want to ask a question there. So what percentage are successfully completing the specialty courts? Is it high?
It is pretty high. I will break down the different programs. I don't have those statistics with me, but we do. I would say we have a good percentage rate, but I can get that information for you. It's intense court supervision. Participants, depending on the program, will come to court every week. As they progress and show that they are in compliance and doing well with treatment, then they will go to biweekly and then monthly. They have routine random drug testing, counseling, 12-step meetings, community service. Everything is monitored. The fees, restitution, if they owe restitution to victims. Each program, we have different programs. They can be as a minimum of 12 months all the way to 5 years. And if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, they impose sanctions. And those sanctions for noncompliance could be a weekend in jail, increased community service hours, increased meetings. If they are exhibiting use, they could go from an outpatient treatment program into an inpatient treatment program. And the whole goal is to have these individuals, again, break the cycle of addiction, become sober, become better parents, better daughters, better sons, and better members of society. And our Families First program is a reunification program, and the incentive for these individuals is to, if they do everything well, have an opportunity to have their children back. So we have 6 of these programs in Carson City. Our district court has been in operation for 12 years. We have 131 participants. Our district court has a DUI felony program, and that's mandated by the legislature. And we have average about 20 participants in that program. Our Justice Court Mental Health Court program, 11 years in operation, and we average 24 to 35 participants. Our Justice Court Misdemeanor Treatment Court is our newest specialty court. We will have our first year anniversary on July 2nd. We have 33 participants, and we're really hoping that catching individuals at the misdemeanor level, turning their lives around, getting them into treatment, will hopefully avoid them coming back and graduating to the gross misdemeanor felony level. We anticipate that program growing in 2017 to 50 participants. Our juvenile drug court has been operational for 17 years, average about 10 participants, and then our juvenile court families for 7 years with 4 participants. So how do we fund these programs? Non-general fund money. I am the designated grant writer, and that's a snapshot of what these programs cost. And also included on the bottom is our new jury system, and we implemented that system, and we are go live this month. I'm very excited about that program to provide additional services to the community, being able to communicate through email, through text, defer jury service online, and we estimated we're saving about 600 staff hours with this new automated system. We received a grant for $43,245 for that system. We matched the grant requirement. That was approximately $18,000. I went to the Internal Finance Committee, and they were gracious. They said once you install it, the following fiscal year, we will help pay for those licensing fees, which will run $16,000 to $17,000 per year. So we're very excited about that program. So it's about $402,721 through grants that pay for all of that, all of those programs. So our general fund court budget, again, budget 4,700, which is the district justice and municipal court, is $3,830,562 for FY17. I will note that our service supplies, a large portion of that is for mandated services, and I will go through those mandated services that we must pay for. The juvenile court budget is $567,944, and they also have mandatory things that they have to pay for in the service and supply budget. So together, it's $4,398,506 for FY17. So those mandatory services, I give you actual numbers for FY15. We have the PSI reports, which was on another slide, Nancy's slide. They are the pre-sentence investigation reports. That was a pass down in 2012 from the state. All of the applicable NRSs are next to the items. Attorney fees, when the judges appoint attorneys for indigent representation. Mental health evaluations, that's when there's an issue to determine competency, if that person is competent to proceed with the adjudication process. Court reporter fees, even though we terminated 2 of the positions in 2010, we still have mandatory transcripts that have to be prepared. We still use court reporters for jury trials in our criminal in district court. In civil, if a party wants a court reporter, we ask them to reimburse for the cost. Interpreter fees, expert witness fees, and our jury fees and expenses. The same items in the juvenile court and the cost. So it's not all doom and gloom. We do contribute to the general fund. All of these are set by statute. Our court civil filing fees, our court fines that the judges impose, court forfeitures. So if you get a speeding ticket and you don't want to come to court and you just pay it, that's considered a forfeiture. Court attorney fees, when the judges appoint an attorney to represent a defendant, if they believe that that defendant has the means to pay a little bit back, usually it's around $500 to $100. In the district and justice and muni courts, they will impose those fees, and then the fines and fees department will collect them. Then we establish court payment plans, and under statute, we can charge a collection fee. And so we charge, if you have a $600 fine and you want to go on a payment plan and it takes you 12 months to pay it, we charge you a fee for that because that's staff time to make sure that they track those payments. And the facility assessment fee, that's $10 on every citation that is paid. And that, it goes towards helping pay for that beautiful courthouse. And that averages between $95,000 and $100,000 per year. The chemical analysis fee, those are for DUIs. Those are, again, statutory, and those are imposed by the judges, and that's $16,885. So in FY15, we gave back $1,222,312. So I talked about court-restricted funds. Those funds come from a portion of filing fees and citations. Those funds, like everything we do at the court, is all statutory. We are limited on what we can use those funds for. We try not to deplete those funds, because if we need help to fund our specialty courts, we will look to those funds to help. So if I write a grant, it's not awarded or it comes in short, we can use our other restricted funds to be able to pay for those programs, so we don't have to come back to the city and ask for money. So there's a snapshot of things that we have paid for: renovation furniture, our new courtroom furniture. The JAV system is our audio-video system that we use to record hearings. Our case management user fees, we use the state-hosted case management system for our courts to track our cases, and we have to pay user fees for that. Computers, printers, copiers, monitors, whatever we can pay for, we try to utilize our court-restricted funds. We've done some major building security enhancements.
That was for last fiscal year.
And we also are audited. We have a triennial audit that we are mandatory by the Supreme Court to do. And thankfully for Karen, she's an expert with minimum accounting standards, and so she makes sure that all of our processing for collection of fees and fines are up to snuff, and we pass those audits, have passed them, glowingly passed them throughout the years. We have used money for training, mediation training and services for our mediators. And when times got tough, we had a fund. We were looking for money to help offset our costs at the court. And so we had a fund, it was our mediation fund. So we had the idea of using that fund to offset the costs for the special master and the judicial clerk and give that money back to the city. Unfortunately, that fund is almost depleted, but we did that for a few years. Then we have the court-appointed advocates, that's CASA, and again, through the statutes, we are able to give them an allocation each fiscal year. This was $27,000 in FY15, $30,000 for FY16, and then we anticipate FY17, $35,000 that we will give to them, and they are do tremendous work for the courts. And miscellaneous supplies. So court-restricted funds that we used, $242,750. So our summary is $4,398,506 for FY17. We anticipate a contribution back, which is 24% of our budget, $1,054,880. And then our court-restricted funds, we anticipate to use $226,119 to meet grant matches. We are in the process of purchasing radios for the bailiffs and marshals and security in the building. We'll be tapping into that fund to pay for that. Also a remodel of the front lobby. We have a match for that grant. We'll be using money to pay for that remodel. We did get a grant, but there's still additional contingency things that come up when you're constructing. And then our grants that we've already written, we have a really, I feel we have a really good chance to be awarded. It's $187,460, which is $413,579. Do you have any questions?
Any questions of Max or Karen? Anybody? Public comments, anybody? I don't see anything here. Thank you, Max. Thank you, Karen. Tell the judges back there, thanks for what they do, and thanks for being cooperative partners in how we move our city forward. So give them our best.
Really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for the thorough report. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot.
Learned a lot. Okay. I need the board direction here. We've got our department heads here. We can have them each come up, or we can, if a board member wants any particular board member, department head to come up, we can do that now. We'll see if we get done, or leave at least some for, some issues out there for another meeting if we can. But I'd like to see how far we can get on doing the budget if we can do that. So what's the pleasure of the board? It's up to you guys. So.
I don't mind just queuing up a little bit of issues that I would like maybe not addressed today, but things that we could look at between now and the time before we have to finalize the budgets. And I think there are things we've discussed before. And so for me, that was, we talked about doing all of our memberships, the League of Cities, NACO, the stuff like that. So if we could queue that up before we final our budget so we can have a discussion, but again, doesn't necessarily have to be today. And then I'd like to look at cooperative extension. I know that that one's funded with a tax rate, but again, its fund balance is extremely low at $1,000. So I'd just like an understanding or a further discussion on processes within co-op extension. And then just some general questions on the V&T bond and how that's going to pay off. And then I'm noticing that that's gathering a fund balance, so more just an educational piece potentially on the V&T infrastructure account. and then I'll do redevelopment when we get there. So that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, so those issues, City Manager, unless there's an objection from the board, we'll take those up, be prepared to answer those on May 5th at our May 5th meeting. That's when we're having our CIP meeting?
We are.
And that gives us, I think, time to analyze those, make a recommendation, so because on May 19th is the final, but I think, so we can make some final decisions on the 5th, I think.
Whatever the pleasure of the board is, I mean, I think on all of these, I mean, depending on what the other comments are, I mean, we could do them now or whatever the pleasure of the board is.
Right, well, let's see where, pardon me?
I'd like to tee it up for next time.
Tee what up?
The suggestions that Lori had made.
Yeah,
And I also,
for your own,
on the capital outlay portion of things, I'd like to have some numbers on solar, looking at the power bills on all this and all the various buildings and so forth, and what we've looked at in terms of going solar and things of that nature, how that adds up and what savings that would allow us.
Okay.
Brad, you got any specific?
No, I talked to Lori, so my concerns are in her suggestions.
Jim?
Well, at this juncture, are we going to, when Regional Transportation Commission or the funding for that, would that be broken down to, or do I have to specifically list line items I want? Or
Well, yeah, I mean, whatever areas you want them to look at, you can call them up now if you want the RTC.
Well, I'd rather have the information prior to calling them to the podium, and I'd rather have them have the opportunity to gather the information also.
If you can give them a pointer where you want them
Well,
to.
I'd like to know specifically the funding mechanisms and how it's dispersed, street maintenance, repair, snow removal, street sweeping. I'd like to have it broken down rather than just general funding. We have this for certain line items. I want it broken down to how it is in each line item. They're lumping everything together. I do have an appointment with meeting them on the 11th, and maybe that information could bring forward on the 5th of May. So that meeting may determine where we're headed as well. Also, which I've never brought up before, but Parks and Recs in the subsidizing sports, it was mentioned earlier in board meetings, there was $2 million there, and I'd like to have that broken down as well.
Hang on a second, that was my number, and believe me, I thought that came from Mr. Mollendorf, might have come from Larry Warner, but the issue for me, I'm not focused on the $2 million. My issue was subsidy that occurs in government, and that's all it is. So if we're looking to tie down a number of $2 million, it ain't going to happen. But so I'll take, that's where I'm coming from on it. It's just that subsidies occur, so they're not going to be able to answer that one. I don't think anyway, so, okay.
I'll go back to what I was saying. In Parks and Recs, I would like to know how much money is spent on subsidizing sports, where that dollar amount came from. It's immaterial, I just mentioned it, and I regret I did, but I'm looking for more line items on how we're spending the money. We got this whole format is great, but it doesn't break down anything. Also, I would say, just as the court came here today, and as Lori mentioned, it was great learning experience. I think that this happens once a year, and we don't have departments come forward and present their budget, talk about their budgets, and we learn about these things. To put this into one perspective or one meeting, I think it should have been just the budget as an agenda item. It should not have been wrapped in with other agenda items before it. It should have been only specifically the agenda item of the budget, and department heads come forward. We had public meetings, which I greatly appreciate, but this is the learning experience for the board too. We have never met and talked about budgets with any department, and we do it today, and we cram it into one session, whereas we should be looking at this as a separate agenda item all by itself. So how we proceed forward, those are my recommendations. I don't know if they'll go anywhere, but hopefully they will.
Okay, well, do you want to bring up Parks and Rec and RTC today, or you want to, or have you given them enough information so that you can hear from them on May 5th? What's your pleasure? I mean, go either way, because we're here till the duration, so. I'm just trying to ask, which is the best way for you to proceed? I mean, I'm not trying to force you into any
I
answer.
asked for, I don't have any information, so whatever they're going to present here today,
All
I
right,
said.
Parks and Rec, come on up.
Did you want me to pull up their presentation, or to just, okay.
You want the presentation? Sure. Be happy to go through it.
No, I'll interject my thoughts again.
Yep.
I said I would like to have the information prior to the presentation, but if you want to proceed this way, that's fine. But at May 5th, I will ask again for that information, and I'll bring it up at that meeting as well.
Can I
I'd
be-
rather wait
can I-
for the material to be given to me so I can look at it. But you can proceed whichever way you wish.
No, Supervisor Shirk, can I clarify what you're looking for? Because we went back and forth with you a number of times on that sports number, and Roger did provide the total amount, and I can dig that email up right now if you'd like it. So I'm not clear what you're looking for there. I mean, because I don't think you want Roger to go through this brief. You're looking for something specific. It's not clear to me, because we replied to that, and I thought you were okay with that number, and I'm not clear on what you're asking for right now.
Sports, how we're subsidizing sports. How we're subsidizing sports, whether that's through the Visitors Bureau, where the funding comes from, or through the Parks and Recs, or through Question 18, or the quality of life, how it goes to the MAC, it all ties together. So that was not in the information you gave me. It was a general statement, but there were no facts and numbers to back up what I was emailed. It was a general answer to a general question, which I greatly appreciate, but there were no factual data to support it. I didn't have any information, as I just mentioned, Visitors Bureau, the MAC, the Boys and Girls Club, how all this tied together, which I would assume there is numbers to back that up. That's what I was looking for. And I greatly appreciate you answering my questions, and I know they're endless, but there is no information to what you gave me other than a statement, which I greatly appreciate. But if you want to go through this, that's fine, but all I'm looking for is the information prior to this that I can look at and then study. And as back to the RTC, as I mentioned, I'm having a meeting on the 11th. And those numbers they're going to give me, which I asked specifically to be broke down, which I'm willing to wait to the 5th for that to be determined and discuss in public at that meeting those numbers which they're going to provide to me on Monday, the 11th of this month. So, but if you want to go through this, that's fine, but I'm still waiting for the other information, and I'll bring it up at the 5th of May.
Okay, well, I think here's where we are, Jim, or board members, just help me out. I mean, I'm not trying to foreclose anybody's ability to ask whatever, do whatever they want to do to satisfy themselves with respect to a budget. I'm just trying to organize. We got 120 million plus budget, but my understanding is you, Jim, you'd like to have RTC come up and break down between sidewalks, snowplow, and a third one was?
I think right now, RTC has already got my questions.
Okay.
They are preparing those answers, and I'm meeting them on the 11th.
All right.
When we have that meeting, then I'll bring that information to the May 5th meeting, because I'll have the information, we can discuss it.
All right.
That's the same thing I would like to have Parks and Recs do as well, is those numbers, which I just mentioned here today, is to give me those numbers. If that's possible, great.
All right. All right, anybody else want any specific items? Go.
Specific, and I had talked to Patrick about this before, it just specifically what projects are on queue for this year. I do want to have that outlined at that next meeting on May 5th. And Roger, if we can talk about maintenance of parks, and so that we can get some idea of numbers and whether contracting out or doing it, in-house is a better way to go. Okay.
Okay. Anybody want to hear? I mean, Are we okay with this budget with the exception of what we've talked about that we're going to bring back on May 5th? Public comments? Fred, Mr. Volz, come on up.
Yes, good afternoon. For the record, Fred Volz. I have a number of concerns, observations, and suggestions I'd like to make on the overall budget, not necessarily highlighting any one department or division. It's very concerning on the salary assumptions piece of the budget that basically, however it's categorized, everybody's getting an increase at some point on some basis. And there are enough people in Carson City who live here and pay the taxes who had no increase in their Social Security, have had no increase in their income, in fact, a decline, and many people who are structurally unemployed. They can't find a job. So with that said, people who work for the government, whether it's the city, the school district, the state, have a pretty good job. And it would seem like in the spirit of understanding the hardships that a lot of people in this town have to suffer, that they should, when the contracts come up for renewal, not be getting increases for some period of time. It doesn't seem very equitable that state employees, who are non-union, of course, are still not back at their pre-Great Recession-based salaries, even though the governor and the legislature gave them an increase. And enough said on that subject. Secondly, I'm concerned that even with the general fund numbers going up by 13.6% since fiscal year 13, we still have a lot of unfunded maintenance, $10 million in the water system, I understand. Local household income has not increased at this level, and so why should the city be increasing its spending or its taxes at that level? And
help me understand there.
Yes.
On general fund expenditures, unless I missed the chart, they're relatively flat.
Well, I'm looking at this chart that was in the online package. It is page 30 of 39, and it shows...
That's the sales tax increase, right?
No, no, no. This is total general fund expenditures. But the point being that the revenue has gone up significantly more than household incomes in Carson City.
But the expenditures are flat. Debt service?
Well, no, that's including the debt service. I'm totaling them up even though the chart doesn't show that. And what I'm seeing is it goes from a little over 60 million to 68.68 million.
That's on the revenue side.
Oh, I understand that, but what I'm saying is...
But you said the expenditures have gone up 13, maybe you misspoke, but I heard...
Well, no, the title of the chart says general fund expenditures, so I'm going off of that.
That's from the budget open house, and it's the debt service as an percentage of the expenditures.
Say it again, Nancy.
That's from the budget open house that we did, my presentation, and it's the percentage of debt service as it's debt service as a percentage of total general fund expenditures.
That's what that, yeah, that's 4.4, that's gone down.
I'm not talking about the debt service, though. Okay. What I'm saying is I'm combining the debt service plus the yellow bar to get to a total for general fund expenditures, even though it wasn't displayed on the chart. And so that is 13.6% over a 4-year period increase. So that is significant, again, based on the fact that household income in Carson City has not gone up anything close to that. In fact, it's probably gone down.
Fred, did I hear you correctly? That was over a 4-year period?
Yes.
So what we're talking about is approximately
3.6% a year
per year.
Average.
Got it. Okay.
Correct, yes. And the other question I have, which was not in the presentation so far, is shouldn't employees be paying more of their benefit costs, as has happened in the private sector, where people have to pay more for their medical insurance as a copay and any other benefits that they happen to have from their employers? Again, salaries and positions with government are relatively well paid and one of the better jobs to have in this state, unless somebody happens to be a doctor, lawyer, accountant, or some other professional. So, pardon?
I'm retired.
Okay, well then, no doubt this resonates with you, Mayor. Good. Next, I'd like to bring up the ambulance fund chart that was also included in the same presentation that Ms. Paulson put together. I'm concerned about the transfers in year over year being in the hundreds of thousands, And I know the city recently wrote off a number of accounts receivable for a variety of reasons. I'm assuming they made a reasonable effort to try and collect some of that money. But the cash balance is steadily declining, and with the aging population rapidly advancing in Carson City, the demands on those services are probably only likely to increase, not decrease. And so my suggestion here is I'm wondering if anybody has looked at contracting out, just as we've done with the building inspection function and the animal services function, to an outside contractor recently to see if that can make sense, because one of the stats that was provided a few months ago is that it costs us $2,000 every time we send an ambulance out on a 911 medical call. And that seems, in spite of the high salaries for the people there, pretty expensive. Next, I'm concerned about a sort of forced charitable giving of the public money. The city, when it vacated the Northgate facility and occupied the brick building, basically leased this part of this facility out to the Ron Wood operation, a charity, and that's fine, and there's no question about whether they do or don't do good work, but for the public funding to be forced to a particular charity doesn't seem right. That is a private decision that individual people can choose to support a charity or not. Similarly, the $120,000 that we pay to the Boys and Girls Club every year for them being in the community, if people want to contribute to something like that, they're certainly welcome to, and based on the amount of support they have from the private world, that would determine whether they stay viable in the community. But to take scarce public money and support and pick and choose certain charities does not seem appropriate, really, in today's world. Similarly, we have the brick, which, as you may recall, the library insisted that it needed it, and it has vacated it subsequently. It's underutilized, and it would seem like that is a good indication of facilities that the city should be giving serious consideration to selling and using that money to pay down debt, apply to fixing the roads, whatever other priority is deemed to be the most important. And so I would love to see an initiative along those lines. And looking at the organization charts, it was very interesting. Some departments in the city are very, very lean. Others, not so much. And I'll give you two examples, and I'm glad the sheriff is here. I don't know if the fire chief is. But I look at the organization chart in administration, and there are 7 people in the executive ranks of this 139-person department. One of the positions is vacant, and it would seem as though the sheriff should be tasked in his budget to looking at how he can consolidate some of those functions. There are 2 assistants directly to the chief. There's the undersheriff, there are 2 assistant sheriffs, there are 2 chiefs. It seems like a lot of top-heavy management. Maybe there's a business reason for it, but again, it would seem like rather than forcing the people lower down the totem pole to have to do more with less, the people at the top echelons should have to share some of that as well if we're running the city efficiently going forward. Similarly, at the fire department, we have 8 people in the upper echelons for a 59 or 66-person department, 2 deputy chiefs, 3 battalion chiefs, 3 captains. One of those positions of the battalion chief is empty. And that's what I have for now. Thank you for listening. Hopefully some of these things will be looked at.
I just want to bring up my recollection of a couple of the items that you commented on. And the fire chief is sitting there behind you. He can correct me if my memory is faulty, but I believe that he gave us a presentation looking at exactly what you suggested about farming out the ambulance service. And his conclusion was that the cost of farming that out would cost the city more than keeping it in-house and writing off whatever losses we had. In other words, they could perform it more efficiently than farming it out, and our losses would be less.
How recent is that study, do you recall?
If I remember, it was last year. And again, if I misspeak, Bob, then come up and correct me. On the fair market, or on the Northgate, we do account for the fair market rent in the allocations that we provide for them, so we take that into account. And we also, it's not in any data that you're going to see there, when the grants are looked at by the citizen committee that makes recommendations to us. There are calculations of fair market rent that are in those application packages that they review. So for instance, with Ron Woods, if they're getting $150,000 in free rent, that $150,000 figure is actually accounted for when they make decisions on how much to allocate to them. And then in addition to that, most of the funding on those particular nonprofits are based on organizations that provide functions that would probably fall under the city's obligation, and this nonprofit is the only organization out there providing it. So if they didn't provide it, then the city would have to provide it at a greater cost. So those are just my recollections on some of the items that you just commented on, and so you may want to talk to the appropriate people just to make sure that my recollection is accurate.
I'm looking at the budget for Northgate, and I see that the city is paying $29,500 or planning to pay that amount in the next fiscal year for utilities. Okay, it does not show up on here that way.
Yeah, we get that money back.
Okay.
In a different line, in a revenue line.
Okay. But to your point, Supervisor, about the charities performing work that the city would have to perform, I don't know that that is necessarily the criterion for employing a charity, because do we have a competitive bidding process to decide which charity is going to perform that work? Just like NHS has come down from Reno to run our shelter, maybe we should be bidding that out to other charitable organizations and see who will do the most for the least for us. And I don't see where that's happened anywhere along the line. Whatever that board is selecting, they're basically favoring one charity over another, and it's a no competitive bid situation. So I would certainly ask that question of whoever is making these decisions, because all charities want some of the city money in this town, I'm sure. There's no question. Of course they would. If they could have some, they would love to receive it. But to pick and choose among them, and basically for the citizens not to have any choice about where that money is going, seems to be troubling to me anyway.
Those recommendations are actually made by a citizen committee to us.
But the point being, they're picking and choosing the winners among the charities, and that should trouble all of you, I would hope, because there are other charities that might well want to participate in that, and they may be in the region, they may not be just local here. So, thank you.
Thank you, Fred, very much. Okay. All right, other public comment? I don't see any, so let me just make sure we're clear before I, we won't take a vote on the budget now. We'll wait until May 5th, and then on May 5th, we're going to discuss the items that Jim brought up on, are we clear on what Jim brought up? He's going to meet on the 11th, and then we're clear on those items, right? All right, and then the items that Lori brought up, and the items that Brad and Karen brought up. So we'll take up just those items on May 5th, and then we're going to finish the budget. Can we do that, board? I mean, I'm just trying to get your...
Well, the only other presentation we were planning was, right, Mr. Mayor, would be the capital improvement program.
Yeah, we got to do the I'm sorry, I didn't mean not to put that on, but that
and then, you know, obviously taking into account the board's guidance and modifications, if there are any, we would then present the final budget for the board's approval. What's the second meeting in May?
The 19th.
The law has been changed. It no longer has to be that third Monday in May. It's going to be our normally scheduled second meeting in May.
Okay, is that all right? Board members, is that all right?
Well, I just have one quick question.
Go.
For those meetings that are scheduled for the budget, are you going to have the morning session as packed as you will this one? I mean, are we going to be limited to an afternoon session to talk about the budget, or will budget go first and everything else will come second on the agenda forthcoming on May 5th? Is it just strictly budget, or are you going to have a full agenda budget, a full agenda items?
Sure. Well, what we're planning to present on May 5th is the CIP, which is the capital projects, the staff recommended prioritization of that. You know, that typically doesn't take that long. I mean, we spent, I think, an hour and a half on it last year. These items that I have here, I don't see these taking that long. The RTC items could take a while, but, I mean, there's no other presentation we plan to do, if that,
Well, I'm just worried the agenda will be an assortment of agenda items, and we're not going to focus on the budget, which we should be doing. And I'm not saying that even when we come back May 5th, it's not to say you couldn't call on a department head if you had questions about anything on the budget. We're not limited. We can call department heads at May.
and I'll word that agenda so that you are able to have that flexibility, Supervisor Shirk, so that you would be able to call anyone up there to discuss any item within the budget that you want. But our intent is, I kept a running tally of all the requirements that have been articulated here. We'll present those, we'll present the capital, and then obviously any additional questions that you may have, we'll be ready to answer those as well.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're not limited to, we can only talk about those items which we just brought up here. We can talk about anything on the agenda if it's the budget.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Everybody okay with that?
So did that just take care of 27B and not redevelopment yet, right?
Not redevelopment.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. All right, then, let me see here where we are, so I don't think we need a motion, Jim, unless you think we do.
No, I don't. Just asking.
All right, we'll take concluding public comment for the Board of Supervisors. Anybody? I don't see any, and everybody's clear on what we're going to do on the 5th, okay? Don't see any concluding public comment, then are we ready to adjourn as the Board of Supervisors? Unless there's an objection, we're adjourned. I'm going to turn the gavel over to Redevelopment Chair, Supervisor Abowd.
I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Redevelopment Authority and let the record show that we have a quorum. Move on to item number 31, public comment. Is there any public comment at this time? Seeing none, I'm going to move on then to item number 32, possible action for the approval of the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes for January 7th, 21st, and March 3rd of 2016?
I move to approve the minutes of January 7th, 2016, January 21st, 2016, and March 3rd, 2016 as presented.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. On to item number 33 with finance. And Sherry, are you going to take us through this? Okay, great. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
May I do something, because I really have just a couple of questions for Mr. Dolly, and I think he needs to leave with his child in tow there. So is there just an opportunity that before she presents, I could ask just 2 to 3 questions so that he can leave?
Go right ahead.
I'll try to accommodate. Thank you, Dave. I could see that little antsiness back there. Thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate it. I had a discussion with you yesterday. There's an item in this agenda that discusses the property values that deal with redevelopment, and that 107 of those properties are not at the 1985 level when Redevelopment District 1 was established. And then there's 2 methodologies employed to determine the values, and I'd like to just have you kind of walk us through that and the percentage and the discussion that we had yesterday. I'd really appreciate that.
Thank you, Supervisor Bagwell. Dave Dolly, Carson City Assessor. There are currently 107, and I was mistaken. It's District 1.5, 1.6, and 1.7. It's both redevelopment districts, in which the base value is actually, or the taxable value for this year is actually less than the base value. So what that means is typically what happens is all of those values underneath the base value, those taxes that are collected are distributed to all the entities, all the taxing entities. So you've got the school district, you've got the city, you've got the senior center, all of those other entities. The amount over and above that base value is called the incremental value. That incremental value, the taxes that are collected based on that value are what go to the redevelopment district itself. So these 107 parcels that are below the base value, there should be no money going to redevelopment from this particular parcel. How it was done in the past is the programming, what they did is they actually took the total value and then they took a portion of it from each parcel. So hypothetically, you could have like 34.66% of the incremental value going to redevelopment from every single parcel, whether or not the value actually met the base value itself. And so Mr. Kramer and I, when Mr. Kramer was the city treasurer, we thought that's not right. Why should a parcel that has no value, or the value is below the incremental or the base value, why should any of those values or any of those monies be going to redevelopment? And so what we're finding is we've done it that way. We've put in the base value for every parcel, so now we know exactly how much is going to each individual parcel. The programming for the system itself, what it's doing, and Ms. Paulson, if you could help me with this a little bit, we figured it out yesterday, finally. When you look at the actual budget itself, the numbers that we come up with are different than what the state comes up with. And what we're finding is that the value, they're taking a negative value or a negative amount from those parcels that are not being included into the redevelopment value itself, or incremental values. So that's why we're coming up with a different value, and that's why you see a different value on the budget itself. So I talked fast, I'm sorry.
So
thank you, Dave.
I just wanted to say in general why I'm asking these questions, and my concern about redevelopment is that at a later date, as we begin to pay off, the debt will be coming as a payoff, the Michael Hall thing is ending. I really would like us as a board to really determine the value of redevelopment. We have 107 properties that are not even at the 1985 level. Are we achieving the goal of redevelopment? Should we have been concentrating our efforts on those 107 properties, and we didn't even realize we had properties? We're not getting there. And I guess what I'm looking for is, would it be better to dissolve this and let this money flow back into our general fund and meet our street needs and our fire department needs and our police department needs? So I just bring this up, excuse me, as a general discussion for future debate, that we really look at the success of redevelopment, and is it eliminating blight as it was originally intended. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Bagwell.
And Dave, if I could just add, we're assuming flat, that there will be no increase in the value of these properties going forward, the 107 properties. So if part of this discussion, and you should be part of it too when we do this, is that what are your assumptions in terms of any property tax increase with regards to these properties as we move forward?
Supervisor Abad, what we found is the actual incremental value went up about $10 million this year. And the reason that it went up was because for last fiscal year, we added 15% economic obsolescence on all commercial industrial properties. This year, we actually removed that 15%. So it did increase the actual incremental value up about $10 million. However, of the parcels, we have about, let's see, there are 623 taxable parcels in District 1.5. That's the downtown. 144 and then 82 in the South Redevelopment District. We do anticipate that the values are going to be going up. The problem that we're having is the fact that the only real value that we could increase is land value, because land value is based on the market value. We're not seeing a lot of sales of commercial property downtown. And so that's a huge issue for us, especially since there's no vacant properties that are selling. But yes, when we try to determine those type of values, we're looking for trends in Carson City to see what's going on. So if the trend indicates that the commercial is going up, then yes, we are going to increase the values. And if I might just add a couple more things, District 1.5 was actually put into place in 1986, and in 2000, the board, not this board, but the board at that time did increase and added an additional, made the district itself a 45-year district. And so in 2031 is when that district itself is supposed to be dissolved. The South Carson redevelopment district was put into place in 2004, and it's set to expire in 2034. So, I mean, there's still quite a bit of time in it.
But we could dissolve them with policies and practices. After we meet some obligations of debt.
That's a definite legal question. I'm staying out of that one.
Well, one follow-up question. Great points of interest to bring up, and then we say we're going to have future discussion, but I don't know when that will take place either. So I'm kind of looking forward to look forward to more of a direction. I'm sorry. Of what we're going to do. I mean, we can talk all this, we're going to have future discussion, but I'd like to have it pinpointed when we will have those future discussions. Now you, go ahead.
So it's just a thought for me is that many of the things that we work on, so over the next 2 years, this could probably sit on one of your goals for the city manager, and I'm only speaking for myself, but that we would have you start putting key indicators in as to when we should be addressing these issues. And so for me, this one should hit a mark in the next 2 to 3 years, because again, in 2020, we will have paid off debt. And that's when we have some opportunities to make some decisions. And so I'm just asking that this not get lost in a discussion. So I would think in 2018, this should come up as a big discussion, the RAC and other people and maybe some citizens and things to discuss. Again, is this our true priority, or would this money be better spent in a different fashion? So it's just a planning tool for all of us to think of the future.
Brad, do you have a comment?
Nope.
Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Sorry.
That's all right. Sherry?
All righty. So, property taxes, we're going to start there because that's the one big revenue in the redevelopment agency. It's expected to be $1,717,909 for fiscal year 2017. It's a 1.2 increase from fiscal year 16. As you guys are aware, the CIP is very low, so that's capped at that level. Salaries and benefits increased very, very moderately. There's only a very few employees, I think less than one employee in this fund, so it only increased $1,500. Debt service for fiscal 17 is $279,600, and that debt is actually paid off in 2021. The whole is 2020. You're close, very close. The general fund internal service charge actually decreased quite a bit. I looked in detail, and it's really across the board. They're not using treasurers, clerks, IT, district attorney services as much as they had in the past, so it decreased about 35% from the prior year. And then I think a big part of that is the business development manager is now in the city manager's office as opposed to RDA. So those are the operating expenses. These are the incentives for the redevelopment. Just to go through them real quickly, we budgeted $160,000 for the incentives at Southgate and Carson Mall. If you need to know who those are, Big Lots, Big Five, Sportsman, and Beals. And then we have budgeted $145,000 in special events, Nevada Day, Christmas tree lighting, farmers market. We budgeted $90,000 for facade improvements and utility assistant programs. $30,000 for downtown equipment and infrastructure. And then we have $225,000 available for undesignated capital infrastructure projects as well. And then, of course, the $480,000 repayment of the Michael Hull incentive for 17 as well.
On the back one slide, if you could, I thought it was more for the facade. I thought it was more than 90,000.
It was 150 this year, I believe, and 90 next year.
I'm sorry?
I believe in 16 it's higher, and that'll roll forward if not used to 17. Yeah, you're welcome. So this is the big picture of the redevelopment. You see there's a big miscellaneous revenue. That's the McFadden donation of $125,000 in 15 and 16. We usually have about, 10 to 15,000 in miscellaneous, but that's a big one for this fund.
Sherry, services and supplies, $1,107,379. What is that?
They're basically all your incentives.
Yeah, that's all the incentives, as well as, the operating, it's all together. Oh, and Michael Hull, yeah. Okay, so if we go on to the next slide, this is the total revenue and expenses for 2017 broken down by district. And at the bottom is the services and supplies not including incentives, 182,378. I'm not sure if you have any questions on that. I was going to go through that relatively quickly because it just breaks down the services and supplies, the salaries and benefits, and then all of the incentives.
Any board questions?
Yeah, the infrastructure projects for $225,000, what does that consist of?
It's actually undesignated, so that's whatever the board decides to do. And if they don't use it, it rolls forward.
Can that be used outside of the redevelopment? Can we do, or it must be used within the redevelopment itself, correct?
Right.
And anything on the special events, that is just Nevada Day Parade and a couple of other things, correct? There's not a,
Right,
this is,
the
you have all this
farmer's
broken
market.
down to, if the public was to look at this, you would have it all broke down to what that 165,000 consists of, right?
Yes, I think on the next slide it's broken out a little more.
There you go.
So this has got your actual Nevada Day, farmer's market, Christmas tree lighting. There's Epic Rides, which is included in that 145. Or 165, sure. So, and this slide shows you the 5-year projection. And Supervisor Bagwell is absolutely correct that when we hit 2020 and 21, we end up with very large undesignated projects. So that would be the board's pleasure what they want to do. And that's really it, if you didn't have any other questions.
Any other board questions regarding this? Public comment? All right. Seeing none, we need to bring this back for a motion?
That's just direction.
Or just direction?
Submit it as is.
All right. All right. Enough direction? All right, thank you. That was easy direction. All right, and by the way, Nancy, I just want to thank you. You did a phenomenal job, both of you did, on this budget. It was a great presentation. In the 6 years that I've been doing this, this was tremendous.
Thank you very much. It was a combined effort of ideas from the board and the city manager and all of my staff, getting this all together, so.
All right, one more final public comment. Seeing none, I'm motion to adjourn as the redevelopment authority, and I'll turn the gavel back to the mayor.
Well, I'm all done.
You're it. I'm done.
You're it.